across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense.
Good morning and welcome to Morning Glory. It's 2 minutes past 6 and the sun is not yet up, but I can tell you this, we're looking ahead to a big day here of news, of views, of opinions and of course of what can only be described as growth. Growth is a big word today because it's Wednesday and what we need to know is why Rachel Reeves is going to get up and later make a speech in which she's going to say, I will fight for growth. That's what it says on the front page of the Daily Telegraph. And on the front pages all over the place this morning, we've got Rachel Reeves saying that, you know, it's all about growth. It's nothing to do with anything else. It's nothing to do with whether we're going to tax you into oblivion. Nothing to do with whether we are killing the economy. The front page of the Daily Mail says that Labour was last night urged to stop punishing businesses with anti-growth measures, tear down the barriers to growth that you created. And that's what the critics are saying. Meanwhile, you've got on the front page of the Times, poor old Keir Starmer making out that actually he's a bit like Margaret Thatcher. He's about as much like Margaret Thatcher as I am, in the sense that we are completely of different genders and we are not, in fact, alive at the same time. He is not like Margaret Thatcher. He has got nothing to say that's good about what he's doing in Parliament right now. We will talk about that. Theo Usherwood is here. The big story today, as I say, is the economy. We're also going to be talking about Peter Mandelson, who seems to be even more unlikely now to get the job as US ambassador in the Trump administration. We're also going to talk about 90% of our streets blighted by litter. A new report has come out and said hospital corridors are now full up. An amazing picture in the Sun of people actually lying on trolleys in corridors, trying to be treated in hospitals, not really doing very well. The other big story, something like a ridiculous number of people who work for the armed forces, troops in this country, are on weight loss drugs. People are going, well, how is that the case? What happened to the good old, you know, run up and down for 15 minutes and then run around the block? Nobody really knows. 0344 499 1000 is the number. Send us a voice note, send us a text to 87222, send us a tweet at talkTV, and of course, we know how to do it, a WhatsApp basically montage of callers. This is what you have to say to me on every single day.
Hi Mike, it's Ian from Worcester.
Good morning Mike, great show.
Hi Mike, Richard from Telford here.
Good morning Mike, great show.
Morning Mike, it's Fiona in Dorset.
Hi Mike, Junior from Bristol.
Good morning Mike, it's Sarah from Croydon.
Hi Mike, I love your show so much.
4 hours of Mike Gray, Monday to Friday, loving it. Brilliant!
We'll also be talking about the matters arising from the big story yesterday, which was the population projections, which say that we're going to have something like 72.5 million people living in this country by 2032. Well, as I said yesterday, I've got some news for the Office of National Statistics. I think we're already there. Tony Smith wrote a big piece in The Sun this morning, and we will talk to him about that, because at the very least, we must have now 10 million more people living in this country than there were when I was born in Britain many years ago. 0344 499 1000 is the number. This is Morning Glory. Let's get it on. As if by magic, we have arrived. Theo Usherwood is here. Very good morning to you.
Great to be here.
Great to see you. An awful lot of Rachel Reeves this morning. You know,
yes.
You can't get away from it. She's going to make a speech this morning at which she's going to kind of set out her pretty much a sort of reset, if you want, trying to make out that actually, you know, it's not that we didn't do it right in the first place, but now we're going to sort of just reiterate that what we want to do now is a little bit different from what we wanted to do, you know, 3 months ago.
Yes, I mean, we've heard of course, we knew about those tax rises, £40 billion, £25 billion on business in terms of national insurance.
Yeah.
That made most people who were there in a big business of trying to set up a small business,
right,
hold their head in their hands and want to go, you know, and just be and just look at it and think, what are you doing if you want growth? You know, governments don't create jobs. They don't.
No, they can't.
They don't.
Unless they do it in the public
growth.
sector.
Unless they do like massive public sector spending.
Yeah.
You only get the money for public sector spending if you get people to go out there and work and create jobs and create tax receipts, which you can then go and spend on public money, public projects, whether it be the NHS or education or whatever. And that's the bit they neglected, because they said, right, we're going to tax you to the hilt, and it's not like we haven't got.
But also, don't you get the sense as well, Theo, that it's not working? I mean, all the people they want to tax, non-doms, for example, they've gone. They've just gone. Well, sorry, we're just not only are we not going to pay the extra taxes you want us to pay, we're not paying the taxes we were paying. I've got lots and lots of people telling me who run companies who can work from other places like Italy, Portugal, Dubai. They're all gone. They're all going. Greg Swenson was in here the other day, yesterday, head of Republicans overseas. He's going back to America because he's worked out that his accountants told him, if you stay here, you're going to be paying this much more in tax. He's not having it. He's going. And so now they don't get any tax.
No. Because it's those people, you know, I know the left hate them. We can understand why they hate them. They're rich, but actually they're the ones
who why do they hate rich people? What's wrong with them?
Because I think there's ideologically, there's a view in the Labour Party and beyond on the left that people should that we should have equality right across the board, and that's the problem.
Yeah, but that is the problem, because ideologically they hate the rich. You're quite right to say it. I'm not asking you to justify that. I'm just saying, you know, why do they hate the rich? The rich are the people that keep the country going. The rich are the people who provide them with the money and the wherewithal to actually have public services. I always have this argument with people that work for things like the NHS. I'm like, without people like me, there would be no NHS.
Look across the river. That creates the City of London square mile. Great, and that's it's pretty much the wealthiest square mile in the country. Creates, you know, 10 billion pounds.
The top 1% of people in this country pay something ridiculously like 40% of all the taxes that are brought into the exchequer.
Yes, and what's interesting, obviously, you know, Keir Starmer is trying to invoke Margaret Thatcher. He's just like Margaret Thatcher. Rachel Reeves, you know, they're trying to appeal to businesses. But I think the problem they're going to have is convincing the people that matter that they're true to their word, that actually what they're saying is legitimate, when their actions speak differently. So, for instance, I was in a briefing with the Prime Minister's spokesman yesterday, and he was trying to convince us all, these are the political journalists in Westminster, that the workers' rights reforms, which businesses have said is going to cost them £5 billion, by the way.
Which nobody wants. I mean, every business I talked to, I was in a restaurant yesterday, and the restaurant owners were sitting with me, and they basically said, all of our profits are going to be wiped out by the increase in minimum wage and the increase in national insurance. In April, they will make no money.
Yes, and why would they invest here when they're going to have stipulations about offering their staff 4-day weeks? It's that problem when actually businesses are saying, no, this doesn't make us want to invest, but the government is saying, no, we do think this is good for you. This is what you need, but even though it's going to cost us £5 billion. And that's and then, you know, you look ahead to, well, as you say, to April, the increase in taxes that we're seeing, this £25 billion on national insurance contributions that businesses are saying, well, actually, you know, and these are big, some of these businesses are big supermarkets like Tesco and Asda. You know, they've got to increase the national living wage. We're going to, how they go, they're the ones who are going to have to foot the bill for that, and they're saying it's going to cost jobs because they can't.
And what Labour have basically done is they've come in and they've gone, you know, these people are making too much money. In the case of all of the, say, supermarket chains, they're all making hundreds of millions of
very fine
pounds.
Margins.
Yes, however, those profits that they make are used for reasonably good purposes. You know, they're not all getting rich on it. And if they want to demonise shareholders, let's face it, shareholders in places like Tesco and Sainsbury's and maybe Waitrose even are actually people not necessarily making money. They're pension funds. They're people who have got, you know, long-term investments, hoping to retire into a place where they can actually afford to do what they want to do in life, you know. And so this kind of war on the rich is actually not a war on the rich, it's a war on everyone.
Yes, and that's before we come on to net zero, because of course one of the big projects that's going to be announced today is a third runway at Heathrow Airport. Labour previously opposed, but then you had the Energy and Net Zero Secretary Ed Miliband. I mean, he was zealous in telling MPs in front of a committee on Monday, well, you can have your third runway at Heathrow Airport, but only if it meets our carbon emission targets, which, by the way, are to cut carbon emissions in this country by 78% by 2035 on 1990
But they've got
levels.
this ludicrous, they've convinced themselves, as Rachel Reeves talked about this at the weekend, rather confusingly, because she clearly didn't understand it, that she thinks that they're going to have this third runway at Heathrow, which is going to create cleaner air, by the way, right, even though there's going to be more planes flying, because planes aren't going to be circling in the sky over London, which is one, nonsense. Also, two, she thinks there's going to be biofuel, which is going to be created, so that they're going to be using fuel which is much more green. And when she was asked by Laura Kuenssberg, well, why are you shutting down Grangemouth then, which is the one place in Britain where they can make this biofuel, she didn't have an answer. Yeah. She had nowhere to go.
Yeah.
And it's absolute cobblers, isn't it?
And the problem with the, you know, this country actually does need economic growth. That's the
we
the
do.
problem. We
but
really
there isn't
need
any.
it. But there isn't any, and there's not going to be any. You know, the words today are going to be warm words about economic growth. Yeah. But when the actions are so very different, Mike, it's very, you know, that's what matters to these businesses. You can tell a business, please invest in this country, but when what you are doing actively discourages them from people investing in this country, whether they come from overseas or they've already got an existing business in this country and they want to expand that business, then why are they going to do that? They're not going to do that because you share an orange juice and a croissant with them in the City of London on a Wednesday or a Tuesday
Or I took you to China for a free trip, and when we come back, we're all going to sit down together and go, isn't this marvellous? Let's just check in with Rachel from Accounts to find out why she thinks that she's qualified as an economist.
Well, I'm an economist. I studied economics. I got a master's in economics from the London School of Economics, and I worked as an economist at the Bank of England.
There you go. Yeah. She's an economist. She works as an economist. She qualifies as an economist. She studied economics at London School of Economics, so she must be an economist, right? So she must be absolutely and utterly correct when she says she's going for growth. But she can say it as many times as she wants. There is no bleeding growth.
No, it's not. It's bumbling along. It's flatlining. Yeah. And if you look actually back...
This spot on my face is growing faster than the economy, quite frankly.
If you look back, Mike, if you look back to actually the turn, you know, the general election, it was not a good picture, but it was better than it is.
The economy in June was a lot better than it is now.
It was a lot better than it is now. Yeah. And when you know, going back to before the election, businesses wanted stability. They were saying, actually, you know, OK, we can see the point that, you know, we've had multiple prime ministers, from Theresa May to Liz Truss to Rishi Sunak, Boris Johnson, and even as far back as...
Yeah, but the Tories actually weren't bad at the economy. But that was the one bit they got right.
And then what you ended up with in this situation is, OK, you're going to have Labour and you're going to have stability. And then Labour have come in, and rather than just actually saying, let's provide you that stability because we're going to have a 5-year parliamentary term and we don't change our leader every 5 minutes, they've actually done the things that businesses didn't want to happen. And that's created this tension where the business leaders, and it'll be interesting to get business reaction to this growth statement, because I suspect, Mike, it's going to be very cautious. It's going to be very wary about actually the decisions that are being made, because these are, you know, what is being announced today are big public sector projects.
Yes.
They are not actually... If you look at the detail of what businesses want,
this is everything. No, this is everything that's wrong with Labour governments throughout the years. Is that they think that they can create growth, as you said, by stimulating the public sector, and it doesn't create growth, because the one thing we know about the public sector is that it doesn't actually generate any money. All it does is it generates, you know, a need for money to come from taxpayers to fund whatever it is you want to do.
One of the best things that they could have done in terms of stimulating economic growth when they came in was to press ahead, say, with, look, this is a project that could feasibly create economic growth. The dualling of the A303 under Stonehenge. Right. Because then what you do is you end up with a faster road in a particular area of the country where you don't have motorways. Right. And you can get people, you know, it becomes more attractive to go on holiday to Devon and Cornwall. Yes. It becomes more attractive if you're a builder and you're in Salisbury and you're thinking, actually, do I want to drive up to London to do a job? Oh, yes, I can now, because the road is quick. I'll take that job. That's economic growth. But they scrap that on their second, you know, within minutes of coming in.
But here's the thing, and I was looking for this, so forgive me for looking away from you for the moment. The Lister Motor Company, which is a very classic car company, which has been operating in Britain for, you know, tens of decades of years, right? They issued a statement yesterday to say that it's so uncertain now what the deal is between the government and the sort of, you know, the net zero application. We don't know whether the cars that we make are actually going to be able to be sold in 20 years, in 10 years, in 30 years. Yeah. So they've basically suspended all production of their cars. They've suspended all future projects, and they're waiting for an answer from Rachel Reeves. I actually retweeted the thing from Lawrence Whittaker. Lawrence Whittaker is the CEO basically of Lister Cars, and you know, it's not a massive business. It's not an incredible business, but he says, you know, we run it very well. We've been running it for a very long time, and we create some very, very classic British cars. But we're now suspending the production of them because we don't know what the government's policy is on net zero.
Yeah, and when you look at they've you know, we've seen job losses in right across the country in the car industry. We've got Luton, Vauxhall, Ellesmere Port, and the like. And one of the big problems, of course, is that all of these, you know, car manufacturers have is that if they cannot sell a certain proportion of their cars electric vehicles, then any car that is petrol or diesel that is sold beyond a particular quota is fined at something like £15,000 a car. And that money doesn't go to the Treasury, by the way. It goes to Chinese car producers that are turning out electric cars.
Well, I think you pointed this out to me the last time you were on. And so it's not even a sort of an incentive, really, in a way, for anybody other than the Chinese.
It's great. It's great for the Chinese. For the Chinese economy, it's great for the Chinese manufacturers, but for manufacturers in this country who employ people in this country assembling those cars or making parts for those cars, it's literally penalising them. It's handing the incentive to their competitors to build more cars. I mean, part of this plan, you know, it's on the front page of the Eye today. The Chancellor will announce £55 million investment to supply 30,000 extra electric vehicle curbside charging points. Never mind that. I mean, where do you charge a car?
Drop in the ocean.
A drop in the ocean. A friend of mine drove up to Newcastle. It took him 14 hours to drive back from Newcastle. Why? Because he gets to a service station and there's nowhere to charge.
No, and if there is a charging point, if there is a charging point, there's two cars ahead of you, and you've got to wait 45 minutes per car before you can get on there. It's an absolute joke. It's ridiculous.
And he just took it back. He just went and said, "Sorry, I just want a petrol car, please. I just can't stand it."
Well, if you think that's bad, wait till you hear what we've got for you from the Times front page. We're going to come back with that. Keir Starmer basically thinks he's Margaret Thatcher. I mean, he might wear a dress at the weekends, I don't know, or put a wig on, but he's not Margaret Thatcher. He's certainly not the Iron Lady. That would be my view. This is Morning Glory. I'm Mike Graham. Theo Ashwood is here. We'll be back after this.
how successful they've been, and they came back and said, we don't know, we don't do any analysis. We see non-crime hate and crime as separate and distinct. We also contacted the College of Policing and asked them what empirical or academic research they've done as to the effectiveness of non-crime hate incidents, and of course the answer came back, they hadn't done it.
And they were the body that had advised the policing college, that, you know, College of Police, that there's this theory, isn't it, that you have these non-crime hate incidents, that you basically tackle it at the source, and then you don't end up with extreme violence. And there's just simply no evidence for this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. 22 minutes past 6 there. Usherwood is here with us, and he's going to talk us through some of the stories on the front pages this morning. We're going to talk about Keir Starmer in a moment, because on the front page of the Times, the big headline says, Prime Minister invokes Thatcher in promise to cut red tape. He says, I'm going to clear regulatory weeds for business. I mean, it's almost like every day it feels like Keir Starmer has to say something that he's going to do, but then he doesn't do it. Let's ask him, shall we, on what he's got plans to do about growth.
We're setting out for growth, which is the #1 priority of this government, growing our economy, wealth creation. We turn the economy around, get the growth that we need, which I'm absolutely certain we can get. What I will say is that growth is the #1 priority of this government. Economic growth, wealth creation, making sure that people are better off. Growth, 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 growth.
This is a minute, 2.5 minute speech, basically. Yeah. Slightly more, maybe nearly 3 minute speech. He keeps just saying growth is the priority. Yeah. But they can't just keep saying it. No. It's a bit like him saying, trust me, trust me, trust me. People go, no, we don't trust you. He's going growth, 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 growth. There isn't any.
No.
Stop taking the mickey out of the people of this country, you complete and utter wally. Sorry. I mean, I have no respect for him. No. He tells lies, right? Yesterday, we were highlighting the speech that he made before he came into power, saying, next year, we will not be allowing you to pay any more for your council tax, not a penny more. You and I spoke about it. You know, the guy's a liar, right? I'm not having it.
He's got this problem, and what is often, and I think I said it yesterday, and I'll say it again, is that in politics, trust is hard work, hard earned, and it's easily lost.
Yeah.
And they made a calculation whereby, you know, they made a calculation where they realised, Keir Starmer and his team realised what he needed to say to get elected. They realised what the pitfalls were, the heffalump tracks were.
But how cynical and how treacherous and how absolutely and utterly despicable is that? Because you're basically telling me that they're making a case to tell as many lies as they can to get in. That's it.
Yes, and then they've ended up in a situation where they've been unable to keep promises, and they're saying, well, they're trying to, and we've seen this with the WASPy women. They make the case that actually once they've, or they made the case with the black hole, right, that actually what they know now they didn't know back then. But of course, everybody was shouting from the rooftops.
Nobody's buying that. Also, we've got a clip. Again, we've always got a clip. There's a clip from April where Keir Starmer talks about a £54 billion black hole, and he talks about the Tories trying to cover it up. We were shouting from the rooftops about it. And I'm not talking about journalists. I'm not talking about partisan actors in this. The Institute for Fiscal Studies, which is like, down the line, if anything, it's a left of centre, regarded as left of centre. It is, absolutely,
We're saying, no, we know the situation.
They don't like us, so that's all you need to know, right? Right? They don't like us. They come on and they always think we're going to be hostile to them because they assume that we're going to give them a hard time.
Right. Okay.
So you know they're left-wingers.
But they were saying before the election, No, we know the exact state of the economy. We know exactly what Labour is going to face when it comes, and by that point, you know, we're talking June last year.
Yes.
We knew that Keir Starmer was going to be Prime Minister, right? We know the state of the economy. You could be honest about this, what you're going to have to do, but Labour insisted that they were not going to increase taxes. That they were going. Keir Starmer was saying that he was going to do the whole thing with economic growth, and of course they come in and then they say, well, the picture's different. We've got this £22 billion black hole that we didn't.
But he's written a piece in the Times today, right, which is what the front page of the Times goes on about. PM invokes Thatcher in promise to cut red tape. He's basically saying that he's going to follow in her footsteps. He's going to cut regulation in order to create growth, and the regulation that he says he's going to cut. It's all about planning. It's all about barriers that he says are in the way of creating building blocks for the economy. It's all very nebulous. None of it actually means anything, right? Yeah. He actually says this: the Thatcher government in the 1980s deregulated finance capital, and that was the Big Bang, which was a massive thing. You know, I remember it because I'm old enough to remember it. My sister got a job in the city, which she wouldn't have got because she wasn't a bloke, you know, like 10 years earlier. She ended up working in the commodities market, going to the London Metal Exchange, met Nigel Farage working for, you know, Drexel Burnham. You know, it was a massive thing. This is nothing like it. He says, in the new Labour era, globalisation increased the opportunities for trade. This is our equivalent. For too long, regulation has stopped Britain building its future. Today, the Chancellor will show how this government will sweep it away. Well, sweep what away? I mean, what's he talking about? What exactly is holding Britain back? I'll tell you what's holding Britain back is the economic policy of this bleeding government.
So there are some small changes where, when planning regulators, planning committees on councils look at applications, that if it's a brownfield site, so previously be developed on, then actually the go-to answer is that yes, you can have the planning application, you can build.
To do what? Build houses?
Well, you've got to create the jobs as well.
Right, but
you've got to create the communities.
But once they, what I'm saying is, once they deregulate whatever it is they're saying they're deregulating, what's the result of that?
The result of that, they would hope. I don't shoot the messenger here.
No, I know you're not speaking for them.
No, but the hope of that, the hope in all of that is that then, if they can put the onus on councils to say yes to planning applications, the hope is that people will then go out and build homes that people can afford to live in, and then we end up in a situation where, with more house builders...
Sorry, I'm going to ask you the question again, and
I realise the falsity of the argument I'm putting forward.
But how is this creating any growth? How does that create growth just because you build a few houses?
That is a good question. The idea, I think, would be, Mike, that...
Because the answer is it doesn't.
No, it doesn't.
Right?
So I think the idea would be that you could create... I feel like I'm being...
I'm sorry, I don't mean to do this to you,
I'm trying to think. No, you do it. You do it because I think we're sort of thrashing out the paucity of their arguments here. Right?
Yeah.
So the idea is that you build the houses, people can then afford houses, you can then create communities where people want to live, and then they can get on the train and they can go to work.
Right.
And okay,
but it's almost like this has been dreamed up by a 4-year-old in a room with some other 4-year-olds and went, oh, isn't it great? We'll build some houses. Everybody will move. And you want to get sort of David Walliams in and go, everybody will move into the houses and then they'll all get really good jobs over there where there aren't any jobs at the moment. We'll just create the jobs and then they'll send their children to school and then they'll get cars and that will boost the economy and then they'll go shopping. It's rubbish, isn't it? It's cobblers.
There are holes. There is a point.
Holes.
There are holes. Big holes.
Yeah.
There are big holes.
It's a bloody great big sinkhole at the bottom of their economic policy, and everything's falling into it. Look, and I would guarantee you, in 2 months' time, we will not have any more growth than we got now.
No.
And yet, she's going to get up today and say, we're going to grow the economy. No, you're bloody well not, actually.
But you raise another really important point here, and these are all long-term projects. How long is it going to take to build a train line between Oxford and Cambridge for the Silicon Valley? They're
still talking about that, aren't they? This is the other thing. That's the other thing. We want to create Silicon Valley in England. That's not going to happen.
How long is it going to take? How long is it going to take to?
By the time you've taxed the people who've actually come up with the idea of forming a company and put them out of business because they can't afford to pay the people that work for them, you know, there will be zero growth once again. And again, I mean, you know, it's just incredible to me how they just keep thinking they can say this crap. And we're supposed to swallow it like good little, you know, citizens and go, oh, well done, Rachel. Fantastic. Good job. You know, there are people outside of Downing Street who actually live in the real world who are suffering right now and who are putting their companies into hock because they can't make any money.
Yeah.
As I said, I was at a restaurant yesterday, a pretty successful restaurant, and they said our entire profits come April will be wiped out, and we have to decide what to do about that.
And I think there's also an issue here, Mike, in that many. Well, if you look across the cabinet, there is very little business experience. So there is very little, when it comes down to brass tacks, there's very little experience of any cabinet minister, Rachel Reeves, Jonathan Reynolds, Ed Miliband, of them knowing what it is like. And I'm talking directly, you know, in terms of your listeners here, because they know what it's like.
They do.
Up now.
There are people listening to this right now who are
driving into London,
they're literally throwing things out the window, thinking they're so annoyed,
and they're like, I know what it is to sit round the table with my takings for the month and just think, oh, well, the government's going to take that.
Yeah.
Oh, the council's going to take that. Oh, and then what's left for me?
What's left for me?
And then they're like, well, and it's like, there was a guy who used to sell, around the corner from where I lived, he used to sell fish. He was a fishmonger. And he got to the stage where he would get to the end of the day, he'd come in, do a full day's work, pay for his rent, pay for the council for the pitch, pay his taxes, pay for his fuel, come back, and he was left with £15.
Right.
And he just got to the end of it.
You just go,
like, why bother?
What's the point?
Why bother?
Might as well just become a bank robber, or a drug dealer, or maybe an asylum seeker. Let's get a voice note from Nick on growth.
Morning, Mike. It's Nick Moore from Loughborough. Whatever Rachel Reeves says in her speech to promote growth, but in actual fact, more in order to maintain her place on the ministerial gravy train, is irrelevant, because until they ditch this net zero lunacy, there will be no meaningful growth in this country. It's as simple as that. Best wishes, Mike.
Nick, you are absolutely right. It is as simple as that. But it's not only the fact that net zero is going to kill any kind of growth that they want to have, it's that they haven't got a clue about business. They don't know how to make anything grow. Let's have a look at what Beth Rigby now starting to look good against these Labour people. She interviewed Rachel Reeves just the other day. Check this out.
In the manifesto, you criticised the Conservatives for taking the tax burden to a 70-year high. What is it now at the end of this Parliament after your budget? What will it be?
I'm being really straight with people. The tax burden overall goes up, but
What's
we've
it go
made decisions.
Up to, from where?
It's the highest burden of tax I recognise.
I mean, great. So that's supposed to be a positive. It's the highest tax burden ever, and we're going to put it up.
Yeah, and
I mean, I'm sorry. I'm going to really struggle not to say the F word at this point because I just want to go. Just bugger off. Just get lost. Nobody gave them this mandate to come in and tax us even more.
No, and that that was they insisted that they weren't going to put up taxes for working people. Namely, £25 billion is a huge tax rise on national insurance. Right. That's this was. To put it into context, when Gordon Brown came in 1997, and I appreciate we have inflation, but when he came in as Chancellor in 1997, he put up taxes by 14 billion quid. Right? Rachel Reeves comes in and puts up taxes by 40 billion quid. So that gives
but also, let's remember, when Gordon Brown came in to do that, taxes were much lower than they were when Rachel Reeves came in.
Yeah, and it's working people. It is people doing jobs.
Working people
who are struggling.
Yeah.
But that's not just that's not just from like those at the very bottom of the ladder.
No.
That stretches right up.
Yeah, of course it does.
Because people are struggling to make ends meet.
Totally. I mean, it's just ridiculous. Anyway, we'll come back to it because we're overrunning and we're getting into trouble. Theo Usherwood is here. I'm Mike Graham. It's 6:35. This is, of course, Morning Glory, the only place where you'll hear common sense. Imagine if you switched over right now to any other channel. All you would hear is a load of crap about how Rachel Reeves is going to build growth in the country. Well, she isn't, OK? So don't believe a word of it. This is Morning Glory.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 6:37. I'm Mike Graham. We've got some very interesting texts coming in. This one from Rob. Keith Smarmer thinks he's Margaret Thatcher. Do me a favour. The lady is not for imitating, especially from that charlatan. Barry says, morning, Mike. Starmer isn't in the same league as Margaret Thatcher. She was a patriot and loved the country. He definitely isn't, and he definitely does not. And Sharon says, morning, Mike. This government has not got a clue when it comes to economic growth. Trump has only been in power for 10 days, and he has brought trillions into the US economy. Shame on this UK government. I mean, that is true. We haven't really talked about Donald Trump, but he has only been in literally not even 10 days, actually, about 8 days. And he's had a conversation with Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, who's promised him 600 billion quid, like that. Yeah. Right, and suddenly, you know, Trump.
Rachel Reeves went to China and she got
600 million. Yeah, over 5 years, and she's just, you know, it's like chalk and cheese, isn't it? I mean, when you see the things that Donald Trump is able to do and has done just by simply saying. And I know that, you know, the executive authority that he has is different from what we run as a government here, but you know, it's breathtaking in a way. Exactly how much he's getting done. Let's get a quick voice note from Glenn on Labour.
Morning, Mike. Glenn from Suffolk here. Oh, the hypocrisy of Labour. They hate the rich. Keir Starmer's rich. Rachel Reeves and Angela Rayner, they'll be rich by the time we get rid of them. Ed Miliband's rich. I dare say people like Andy Burnham aren't sort of too badly off. Oh, have a good day, Mike.
It is extraordinary, isn't it? Yeah, they are. You know, the political class in this country now are wealthy people. You don't leave office as Prime Minister as anything other than a millionaire, it seems to me, you know. And people have just had enough, I think. They've just seen through it, you know?
Yeah, and just your previous correspondent's point about Donald Trump, I think what's interesting, and the reason I think it's particularly important, is I think when we get, you know, we're going to have a presidential election in 2028, we'll have a general election in the country this year in 2029.
Yes.
And we are going to be able to see, and literally we will be able to see, what Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves have done, their approach, versus the approach taken by Donald Trump. And I suspect if you look at the way the two economies, the UK economy is shaping up against the US economy, and what we're seeing in Wall Street, okay, putting DeepSeek to one side for a minute, but if
that's
you
a bit of a blip, I think.
Yeah,
I was talking to people yesterday who said, you know what, they've made so much money over the last sort of few years that their profits have massively boosted them, and that actually this little blip is not going to make a problem.
But America is where the action is, you know, that is versus this country, and I think we're going to compare the UK, if we continue on this trajectory of not supporting businesses, of not supporting people, you know, actually encouraging people to come in and invest in this country, then we're going to end up in a situation very quickly where Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves compare badly to Donald Trump and the approach he's taking, because they are two
diametrically opposed. Absolutely
opposed.
But let's look at the other big issue, which is going to affect our economy, I think, for years to come. Front page of the Sun: 10 million move here in 10 years, and this is the national statistical information that came out yesterday, just before we finished the show. Yesterday, about 9:30, it came out that we're going to have something like 72.5 million people living here by 2032. Well, to be honest, we've got at least 72 million people living here now, and it's not even very clear whether that's an accurate figure, because we don't know how many illegals we don't know about. But, you know, there's no way, and many politicians have commented on this, there's no way that this is sustainable. No. You can't continually have more and more migrants coming in, because the migration growth is because of migrants coming in, the population growth rather. You know, the birth rate is falling in this country. The birth rate versus the death rate is about the same. We've now got 10 million more people here than there were when I was growing up in the 60s and 70s, and there's no apparent reason to believe that it's ever going to stop at this point.
No, so the trajectory. I mean, Tony Smith, who's former head of UK Border Forces, got
we're going to get him on later.
He's got a very good article on page 10, op-ed piece on page 10 of the Sun this morning. 72.5 million in 7 years' time. That's up 4.9 million. It's almost entirely due to immigration.
It is.
In a healthy economy, democracy, you need to see the birth rate exceeding the death rate. That's the way it's always, but until very recently, it's been since the post-war era to different levels, right? But right now it's at zero. It's flat. So this increase in the population is primarily down to migration. This will be, you know, this projection in terms of what happens between now and 20.
And it may be wildly off, by the way. You know, it's only an ONS projection, because I've been saying, I think they counted the last population accurately counted was 67.9 or something like that in 2022. 3 years since then, we've had a net migration rise of 700,000 each year. So that's another 2 million.
The easiest way to deal with this problem, in terms of getting these net migration numbers down, is to clamp down on the visas. Clamp down on the yes, I'm not for 1 minute diminishing that you have the small.
Yeah, but that is a small number. No, I get that.
But compared to the legal migration, it is much smaller.
No, but we know, because we've seen the numbers, because they come out every year, that in the past 3 years we've had approximately 1.2 million people coming here, and we've had something like 500,000 or 600,000 leaving, which takes us back down to 700,000. Nobody's really sure if those numbers are accurate, but they certainly are. Over 1 million people coming here every single year is not sustainable.
But they won't do it. They won't clamp down on the visas, because businesses and sectors, not just in the public sector, thinking particularly of the NHS, say we need people to come to this country to do the job and work. So that's why they won't do it. I mean, we had Cardiff University. They had a £32 million black hole. They announced 400 job losses yesterday, including their nursing programme. We're not training the people, and universities aren't training the people.
And do we not need to now sort of reassess how we operate in that sense? Because if we've got, as we know we have, 9.5 million people who are sort of, economically inactive, surely we should be making those people train up. Even if some of them can't work, they can do something. Even if we could train up 2 or 3 million of them, which is a third approximately of the figure.
2.8 million people on long-term sickness benefits.
If we could train these people up and get them to work in the NHS, which is what we say we need people for, great. But I mean, the Sun points out more or less that we are now we now have more people living here than they have in France.
Yes,
and we are half the size. By land mass, we are now the most heavily populated country in Europe.
Yes, and it's only going one direction. But the problem that ministers have is that every time somebody turns around and says, we turn around and stop just put limits on visas or make the visas less attractive. Everybody, in industry or in public sector just throws their hands up and says, you can't do that because we need those people to come to this country to do those jobs. And that's the hurdle. And businesses are continually complaining that they are not getting the required level of school leavers coming out of college and further education or even leaving our.
But I tell the story, and I'm starting to tell it now every single day, because it was a story told to me. I think it was actually may have been told to me by Tony Smith, but it was told to me about border security, that one of his former colleagues told him of a story where 3 women came from Nigeria and Africa to be nurses in the NHS. They had absolutely all the right papers. They came in on work visas. They had husbands, who were another 3 people, and they each had 5 children. And so collectively there was 21 people coming into Britain for 3 jobs in the NHS.
Yes,
which is going to maybe give the Exchequer maybe £5,000 a year in tax.
And when you looked at the numbers came out last year, where they said that actually immigration had led to an increase in GDP, but when you looked at GDP per capita, i.e. how well off individuals are as a result of immigration coming in, GDP per capita had fallen. Because with all due respect to those 3 Nigerian nurses who came in to work in the NHS, those are low-paid jobs.
And great, so bring them in, but don't bring 17 other people with them.
Yeah, but the reason the NHS, and I'm not advocating for this, but I'm just explaining the reason they do it. The reason that you have these spousal visas and you can bring your children with them is because otherwise they wouldn't be able to get those people in the first place. Those 3 Nigerian nurses will say, "I'm not going to come to this country."
But the model is broken. It doesn't work.
I would completely agree. We are completely. Well, you said you didn't want to use the F word earlier, Mike, but we
it's
are
hard not to.
But that is the situation we are in. It is completely broken. We are not getting the kids coming out of school to do these jobs. You know, it costs £5,000 if you want to train a nurse. Why don't you just go and work in Tesco? They do. Why bother to do that training? You just go and stack shelves or go and work in a factory. There's no incentive to do it.
Like most people, I go in and out of supermarkets all the time. I see people working there. They seem perfectly happy. It doesn't look like they're downtrodden because they're not doing a job that they think is
those
well
are perfectly valid jobs. I'm not one of those.
No, but what I'm saying is that they're not, you know, it's not like people sometimes say, oh, you know, the trouble with people in Britain is they don't want to do these menial jobs. That's not true. They're quite happy to do menial jobs and they're quite happy to have a job rather than actually be on the dole. But we've got a problem with people who don't want to do those jobs because they want to be on the dole for whatever reason. And there's millions of them, and we need to get them off their arses, frankly, out of bed, get up and get to work, frankly.
Yeah. But, I mean, that will be, I imagine, from what was trailed at the weekend, that's going to be part of the speech from Rachel Reeves. But
which is happening today, we should say.
Mid-morning, about 10 o'clock today.
Yeah, it'd be great.
Is they're going to try and catch down
Rachel from accounts. I was just saying yesterday, I think she's morphing into Keir Starmer. They sound exactly the same. Should we have another look at why she thinks she's qualified to do the job? Because apparently she's an economist. Let's do it.
Well, I'm an economist. I studied economics. I got a master's in economics from the London School of Economics, and I worked as an economist at the Bank of England.
There's nothing else to say, really, is there? We'll be back with a few more stories, nothing to do with economics, I promise you, with Theo Usherwood. I'm Mike Graham.
Useful to know that these kinds of people work in the Home Office. The kind of people who are supposed to be looking after the security of this country think that it's a far-right talking point to go on about grooming gangs. It's useful for us to know that such out-of-touch snobs and idiots are working in the Home Office who look upon the rest of us with what seems like contempt. It is not right-wing, or certainly not far-right, to be concerned about the exploitation of working-class girls by gangs of men.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 6:52. The first hour almost under the way, and away we go. We're talking about a lot of good stories this morning as well, apart from just Rachel Reeves and her speech. Daily Mail's got a piece today which is tucked away, and it's not as if they're paying that much attention to it, but 90% of the country's streets in this country, in Britain, are blighted by litter, according to a study that's been done by a charity called Keep Britain Tidy. They say it's a wake-up call, shows that litter damages the environment, makes people feel depressed and unsafe. And one of the things that people always say to me is that when they go to other countries, they're always so much cleaner. What is it about Britain that has people just throwing stuff away? We've got fly tipping as a problem. We've got, you know, litter everywhere. The streets that you walk down are pretty untidy.
The thing that sends me mad, the thing I get really angry about, is when people just chuck
stuff out of a car. Oh.
Yeah.
No, absolute nightmare.
And it's usually like some fast food wrapping.
Yeah.
They're just shameless about it. They have their food and they're driving along and they will literally just wind down the window and just chuck all of the rubbish out the window.
Yeah.
And it's, I think it may be...
It's antisocial, isn't it?
It's antisocial, but I think I just wonder whether it's slightly instructive about how we see this country, how many people just see this country now.
Right.
You wouldn't do it at home.
No.
You wouldn't litter somewhere if you really cared about this, right? If you were...
I mean, it's a bit like the dog situation. I mean, I go, obviously, walking the dog. It was his birthday yesterday, Ziggy. Happy birthday for yesterday. We already know that. You go to the woods, for example, and you still see people who haven't picked up after their dog, right? Or you see people who have put it in a plastic bag and then just chuck the plastic bag into the sort of other bit of the woods that they think nobody will see. It's like, what's wrong with you? Just take the bag, put it into the bin, which is made for the bag to go in. Why would you not do that?
I think it's about sort of respect, isn't it? If you care about where you live, if you care about the woodland where you take Ziggy for his walks, then you would automatically, for me
look after where you are.
You'd automatically keep it tidy, like you would keep your garden tidy at home, or if King Charles invited you to Buckingham Palace, you wouldn't throw litter then, would you?
No, you
because you'd have a respect for the fact that you're in the garden of Buckingham Palace and you've been invited by King Charles.
Also, you might think that somebody will see you doing it and you won't do it. And I wonder whether, you talk about the people that throw stuff out of their car. They obviously don't care because people aren't necessarily going to give them a hard time. But, most people will not throw litter if they think that you're likely to see them doing it, and you might go up to them and say, would you mind picking that up? But even on like trains and things and public transport, I found that they're now much more untidy than they used to be.
They're dirty, and it's not. Just pick up after
It's a big thing. It is, and it's all about civilization. It's all about the world in which you want to live. How about this one though? This is interesting. More than 500 fat jab prescriptions handed out to servicemen and women. When I read this story, it's called Britain's Wobbly Warriors in the Daily Mail, page 9. I thought to myself, I thought they used to run around exercise yards and sort of be incredibly fit. We've now apparently got an army of people who are overweight.
Yes, and this story is also... The drugs are signed off, this is on page 9 of the Mail, by commanders. At the same time, essential exercises have been scaled back and equipment purchases have been cancelled. So it's like, from what the inference from this article is that actually troops can't actually do anything of use. Because
they're all overweight.
And therefore they're just sort of lounging about watching television.
Have they done away with sergeant majors? And the sergeant majors not exist anymore?
I don't know.
Look at you horrible lot.
I can understand there might be some cuts in the MOD budget, but I don't know why you can't do 5 laps of a exercise yard because of the cuts in the MOD budget. It doesn't make any sense. And what's interesting about this is that the excuse seems to be that if they don't get the weight loss drugs, then they're going to get type 2 diabetes, and then when they have type 2 diabetes, they're going to be on medication. They can still be in the army with type 2 diabetes on medication, but you can't be on the front line.
No.
Because, of course...
So what's the point then?
So what's the point of having them?
Why can't they just say, look, you're too fat, get out?
Well, but that would be a breach of the Equality Act, I think, Mike.
I think we should just do away with that. Have a look at the Times, page 2. Households that only watch streaming services such as Disney Plus and Netflix may be forced to pay the BBC licence fee according to modernisation plans, which are going to be unveiled by the government at some point in the future.
This is another one that drives me mad. I mean, on the eve that you're trying to convince, Rachel Reeves' speech today is not necessarily for the man and woman on the on the street. It's there for foreign investors. It's there for the likes of companies, big companies like Disney or Netflix, to come and invest in this country. So what you're saying is actually Disney, Netflix, you can come and invest in this country, but we're going to tax you, tax your customers because they're using your services to pay for the BBC. Look. Big things are happening in the media at the moment. The world is changing. We're seeing it all the time. We're
hearing today that Sky News may be taking themselves off linear TV.
We can't get around that. And the BBC cannot be immune.
Like we did. Yeah. Everybody said when we did it, it was like, oh, that's a weird thing to do, isn't it? No, it's not actually.
But the BBC cannot be immune from this stuff. If that's the trend, we can't end up, the British public can't just can't we just be expected to fund them to keep it the way it was? The world is changing.
Yeah, exactly.
And
the argument
and the
was, as you stand King Canute like going, well, this is how we've always done it. Sorry, that's not an argument anymore for anything, is it?
No, and you can't expect. Businesses have adapted, and I don't see why successful companies like Disney or Netflix or any of those other streamers, those customers should be expected to subsidise the BBC.
No,
if the BBC wants to be successful, the BBC can be successful, but it's got to produce. And it does do this, by the way, because there are parts of the BBC that do this. They've got to come up with shows that they can sell around the world and that people will be willing to pay for because they want to subscribe to the BBC app, BBC whatever it is, and download it.
I'm not against the BBC doing good things and making those things work. If they do them well, then let them do them and let them make money. It's fine.
The BBC. But the problem, of course, is the BBC haven't got the people in there with the know-how in order to do this. Let's just say it as it is. They haven't got that. No. They've just got taxpayers' money. They've always just had this licence fee payers' money, so they can just spend the licence fee payers' money rather than actually. Putting in people real business acumen to come in and say, no, this is the way we're going to do it. I just think this is, wholly unfair on Netflix subscribers and Disney subscribers. If I was those two companies, I'd be livid.
Exactly right. We've got a voice now. I don't know if we've got time for it. Have we got time for it? Yeah, let's go.
Hello, Mike. Great show. I don't know if you've seen, but it was announced yesterday that Labour are looking at, because obviously everyone's going away from paying the TV licence, that they're going to tax you if you stream. Well, that's fine, because if they knock at my door, I only use my TV for PlayStation and DVDs. They're going to do tax you for watching DVDs, because if everyone says they don't stream, I mean, they just can't come up with any more excuses to get more tax off you, can they?
I'll tell you what I'd commission if I was at the BBC, right? Here's a show, go to people like Dave's house and trying to get them to pay the licence fee. That would be great fun for an hour, at least. Coming up, loads more on Morning Glory.
I spoke with His Majesty the King to request the dissolution of Parliament, and we will have a general election on the 4th of July.
I have just returned from Buckingham Palace to form the next government of this great nation.
Take a look at what happened. I immediately knew it was very serious, that we were under attack.
The time has come, and this surely is England's time. Williams, who scores, and Spain lead. Shot from distance is in. It is Cole Palmer. Low ball in, or far ball, slides it in.
An absolute killer of a goal.
I agree with the protest, but I don't think the violence was anywhere near necessary.
No, I mean, I don't think anyone, Nigel, would ever think that the violence was the answer at all.
אזרחי ישראל, אנחנו במלחמה.
I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me.
If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in, they're eating the cats.
Liberal left couldn't understand that this man could be anything other than the great newsreader, a man of integrity.
Is it possible in any way, shape or form that Keir Starmer didn't know about these facts about the suspect in Southport?
I find it extraordinary that he wouldn't know. It seems that the public is not being told the truth.
No. There's nothing like an American election, I have to say. North Dakota has gone red, South Dakota's red, Texas is red.
Many people have told me that...
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. 2 minutes past 7. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10 o'clock, of course. It's still dark out there. It's been pretty nasty. The rain yesterday, I know I didn't keep going on about this, but the rain yesterday, I was out for lunch and I was sitting in an area where you could hear the rain falling on the roof of where I was. It was absolutely extraordinary. Really, really torrential. I felt myself, I may have to take a boat home, the way things are going. And we've got like one storm after another. That was the second storm of the week. We're going to move into a third storm and then a fourth storm. And we're not entirely sure exactly where that's all going to end. But do let us know if you are in an area where things are not going terribly well, or if there's flooding, or if there's any kind of delays in any way, shape or form to your train, to your plane, or to your car. Do let us know. We can tell everybody else. 0344 499 1000. The big story this morning is all about Rachel Reeves. You know, she's going to be making a speech at some point this morning. We think sometime after 10. So you'll hear it all on Julie Hartley-Brewer's show. She's going to be talking about growth. And she's going to be saying that, you know, we are building towards growth in this country. The trouble is nobody really believes it. And one of the things that many of you have said is that basically the one thing that is growing, of course, is the population. Great show, Mike, says Clive. There is plenty of growth in this country. The population growth is out of control due to immigration, and the national debt is growing massively. So don't be so negative, says Clive in Solihull. Sad face. It is. I mean, you know, they've managed to grow the national debt to a tune of billions and billions of pounds. They borrowed £18 billion practically in December alone, which is almost the same size of a burden as the 22 billion so-called black hole, right? They've also grown the population by 10 million since I was a boy, and I think it's probably even bigger than that. We've now got 70 million people living in this country, more people living here than there are in France, which is twice the size of England, twice the size of Britain. It is absolutely ridiculous, absolutely extraordinary. 0344 499 1000. Also, let's talk about litter. Why is Britain such a ridiculously litter-strewn country? What is wrong with people? Why, when you go to other countries in the world, they're not absolutely struggling to try and clean up all the litter? It just doesn't happen. 0344 499 1000 is the number. We're going to talk about the NHS as well, because a new report has come out in which it says the NHS is basically not fit for purpose. There are hospital corridors full of people and nobody seems to know, including West Streeting, how to fix it. 0344 499 1000. This, of course, is Morning Glory. Let's get it on. Let's talk about Rachel Reeves this morning. You might remember at the weekend, Trevor Phillips interviewed her on Sky TV, which may well soon be online only. I wonder if people will give them a hard time the way they gave us a hard time when we decided it was a bad idea to actually be on television, as you call it, as on Freeview, because it costs a ridiculous amount of money. Here's what Rachel Reeves said when she was asked about how she feels about being called Rachel from Accounts.
Does it hurt you to be described as Rachel from Accounts?
Well, you know, I've probably been called worse things, Trevor, but I became an MP almost 15 years ago now. Before I became a Member of Parliament, I worked as an economist at the Bank of England, and then I worked in the private sector in financial services for Halifax Bank of Scotland. I'm proud of the jobs that I did before I became a Member of Parliament, but in the end, people are going to judge me on the job that I'm doing now, the job that I'm doing as Chancellor of the Exchequer.
Yeah, we are going to judge you on the job you're doing now as Chancellor of the Exchequer, and it's not a very good one. It has to be said. Let's find out from Charlie Rowley what he thinks, former Conservative Special Advisor, of course. Charlie, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike.
So it's another big day for Rachel from Accounts. She's going to set out her stall. She's going to try and pretend, I imagine, that this is not a new speech that she's making. She's going to try and pretend that she's carrying on just as she meant to do, and this is no surprise at all. But this is basically her trying to correct what has gone before, isn't it? And this is her trying to make out to the populace and also to the city that she knows what she's doing.
That's absolutely right. And look, it comes on the back of a story last week where she was now saying that the UK needs a bit of Trump optimism on the back of Donald Trump's question. And you think, my word, having, said anything that they wanted to about the poor man over the last 4 or 5 years, 10 years even probably, to denigrate him and criticise him, they now want to take a leaf out of his book to generate growth. Well, better late than never, but no one will see through the plan or through the change, which is clearly a massive U-turn after talking down the economy for so long, where the Bank of England reduced its own growth rates from, I think, 0.3% to 0. She's now obviously got to do something to bring back the confidence that since her budget seems to have been lost.
Right. But she keeps talking about growth, and Keir Starmer keeps talking about growth, but it's almost like they think they can keep saying something and it will come true, like the magic fairy will suddenly arrive from, the stage in the West End and it'll go, oh, look, we've suddenly grown the economy. They're not growing the economy. There's nothing that they're doing which is stimulating growth. All I hear from people, whether they're in small business or big business or indeed in hospitality business or, any other business that you can think of in Britain, all they say is that wait till it gets worse in April when the minimum wage goes up and when the national insurance goes up. And frankly, we are not looking forward to this year financially because we might actually all go out of business.
Well, that's absolutely right. I mean, to continue that theatre analogy, anyone could think that this was some sort of pantomime or a Greek tragedy, depending on which way you look at it.
Can we have Keir Starmer and Angela Rayner as the ugly sisters?
Oh yes, we can.
Yeah, no, look out behind, he's behind you. For God's sake, there are so many jokes here. I'm sorry, I'll have to move off. But no, but it's true though. People have no faith in these idiots, right? They're not doing anything good. They're not making anything work for anyone. There's nobody that's happy with what they're doing.
And you've got to look, actions, I think, will speak louder than any kind of words that the government put forward. And the actions of this government so far have been, during a general election, to pledge not to rise national insurance contributions. Then come the budget, they slapped a rise on national insurance contributions, costing businesses who are now saying that obviously they can't afford to take on that extra person or employ that new trainee.
Right.
Yes, coupled with that rise in the minimum wage. Nothing wrong with that per se, but given the lack of confidence and with inflation stubbornly high amongst businesses, they're treading a tightrope. But all of the suggestions so far that the government have put forward seem to be anti-growth rather than going for growth, which is what they keep talking about. So the actions will speak louder than words.
Well, this is it. You can't boost the economy, surely, by shrinking the private sector, which is apparently what they're trying to do. There's talk of creating a new Silicon Valley in the UK. Scotland has already got a pretty good, Silicon Valley-style, tech sector, which is very successful and doing very well. But, you can't just create something out of nothing. And similarly, you've got Keir Starmer saying, oh, we're going to deregulate Britain. I'm going to be just like Margaret Thatcher. I'm going to slash the red tape that she did back in the 80s and create the Big Bang. Well, yes, but except he's not doing it. He says he's doing it, but all he's really saying is that he's going to tell local councils to stop blocking planning applications. It doesn't mean anything, does it?
No, and Keir Starmer seems to me to be developing an ability to be able to isolate absolutely everybody. So people on his own side will criticise him when it comes to things like, the 2-child benefit cap, and they'll want to see, even bigger payouts to union bosses and public sector workers and more money going into public services, which he's resisted. So he's isolating himself with his Labour colleagues. But, to compare himself and to try and suggest to the country that he's going to be the next Margaret Thatcher or to Chandler. That's insulting. She would be absolutely turning.
Absolutely, she would.
At that sort of thought that this is a guy that's increased tax on the businesses, as you say, that are the bedrock of our economy, to take away the winter fuel allowance from some of the most vulnerable people in our country, to tax our farmers that put food on our table. You know, she was the grocer's daughter. She knew how a household income and how a household economy worked. And she wouldn't be doing any of this, I wouldn't have thought. So it's a bit of an insult. I have to say, some brass neck.
Yeah,
from
absolutely
the Prime
right.
Minister.
But I mean, let's talk generally now, Charlie, about how they've done, because the first sort of 6 months, the first 100 days, if you like, was pretty disastrous, right? They've kind of turned the corner, if you like, into the new year. We're now in January. It looks as though Rachel Reeves, unfortunately for the rest of us, is probably going to hang around until at least March, when she's going to have to deliver what looks like a small sort of mini budget. How do you see them kind of doing between now and then? You know, they've had some embarrassing, resignations. They've lost the Transport Secretary. They lost Sue Gray, who was meant to be, you know, the genius behind the throne. They've lost also Tulip Siddiq, who may now soon be extradited to Bangladesh to answer questions about her corruption problems. They've got the Attorney General under fire, but they're doing that thing that I hate in politics, which is just sort of clinging on and sitting there and hoping that everything will just kind of get better as time goes on and we'll all forget about how awful they are.
Yeah, and on top of, you know, over about, I think it's 10,000 millionaires leaving this country who would be the entrepreneurs and the investors to create that Silicon Valley that Rachel was talking about. So they've gone. Look, I think it's been difficult. And I think if you speak to anybody, even in the Labour Party, they will sort of say, well, it's not gone quite as well as they would have hoped. Right. I think there's a lack of I think the problem that the Labour government have got is that there is a lack of strategy. The dots don't add up. It seems to be on an issue by issue basis where the Prime Minister or the Chancellor are making decisions that they think are before them without any kind of thread through what it is that they're trying to achieve, which is a little bit alarming because, you know, they've been in opposition for some time now. Keir Starmer has been the leader of the opposition, or was the leader of the opposition for, I think, about 5 years. You know, he had enough time, I think, to generate a narrative about the direction of the country. You can't just say we're going for growth, all the while, as I say, doing things that seem to be counterintuitive to that. So I think, look, you know, when you pen yourself into a corner by saying, I'm not going to raise some of these taxes, if you're sticking to your own sort of fiscal rules as the Chancellor has set out, I think it's the case now that I think, again, economists might be mixed, but I think we are actually in a recession now. And so if that is confirmed in the next month or by the end of the quarter, then that will be very difficult territory for a government that said it wanted to grow, that wanted to do things differently from the previous government. In fact, all of the things that they have done might have triggered that recession. Then, of course, you lose public confidence. In March, as you say, Rachel will have to deliver another budget or fiscal event, whatever you want to call it, and she might have to raise taxes even more, something she's already said she's ruled out. So will that be another U-turn, more pressure on the Chancellor there? Does she have to cut public spending? Something that probably you would have to do to find more efficiency savings, but that will go down like a cup of cold sick amongst her own MPs, I would have thought. So she's in a very, very difficult position, I think, now, hence why the talk of optimism to try and hope to generate that confidence to get that growth that she so desperately needs and wants.
And as they look across the pond and see what Donald Trump is doing, and the call finally came in on Sunday from the White House where, you know, Keir Starmer supposedly had a 45-minute call with him. I'm not sure, I believe that it was as long as that. You know, he's showing the way on all sorts of things, on the economy. He's actually bringing serious money in from places like Saudi Arabia, and he's got, you know, massive investment coming in from some of the big tech companies and all of that. But he's also shown the way on migrants and saying, look, we're going to put some people on planes, we're going to fly them back to Colombia or wherever else they're coming from, and we're going to get on with that. Is that going to have any effect, do you think, on Starmer's kind of next few months in terms of, you know, decisions that he makes?
Definitely, because if there's nothing that Donald Trump is also short of, it's an opinion and a comment on the rest of the world, the world affairs. And I think, look, if there's any kind of joint press conference when the president hopefully eventually comes over, or if there's just a question to the president about what do you think it's like in the UK, how do you think they're handling the migrant crisis, he'll always say, well, I think they can do better. Look at what I've done. I've been able to deport people on day one of my presidency. I don't know why it's so difficult in the UK. He will say something like that, which will generate more conversation, more anger amongst those communities that for too long have been let down by, yes, the last government for not doing what it said it was going to do to bring down immigration. That's obviously on the back of this government scrapping a deterrent Rwanda on day one and still not being able to get a grip of it, plus those population increases that you said were predicted as well, that will send alarm bells through the country. And if you have a government in the UK that doesn't seem to be able to tackling that issue, then of course that's only going to drive people to alternative parties, and that seems to be reform at the minute with the momentum that they're gathering there in the polls.
Yeah, absolutely right. Good to talk to you, Charlie. Thank you very much indeed. Charlie Rowley there, former Conservative Special Advisor. Coming up after the break, we're going to talk a bit more about Rachel Reeves and what she's likely to say later on this morning in terms of how she plans to grow the economy. She can't just keep saying, I'm going to grow the economy, and she can't just keep saying the economy is all about growth. It's all about growth. It's all about growth. It's all about growth. It's not just all about growth, and you can't just keep saying growth as if it's something that's happening when it isn't happening. Let's get a voice note from James.
Good morning, Mike. I don't know if you saw the Selena Gomez video ranting about Trump the other day. Oh my God! Donald is going to take the illegal immigrants out. Where are we going to put these people? The taxpayers should be paying for these illegal immigrants. I'll tell you what, Selena, would you put them up in your house? Nah, I don't think so. Long live Trump. Get in, Mike.
James, listen, appreciate your call. You are, however, 24 hours too late. We played this out yesterday on the show. Let's remind ourselves of what Selena Gomez actually said.
I just want to say that I'm so sorry. All my people are getting attacked. The children. I don't understand. I'm so sorry. I wish I could do something, but I can't. I don't know what to do. I'll try everything, I promise.
You might want to consider the fact that the people who are being sent back to Colombia, particularly on planes, are murderers and rapists and thugs and scumbags. I don't know what to do. I want them all in my house. I don't think you do, actually. You really don't want them in your house, because if you have them in your house, they will do terrible things to you, and you will not recover. I wish I could do something. I wish you could do something as well, other than act like a complete and utter... No, I can't even say it. I'm struggling this morning not to swear, sorry. 0344 499 1000 is the number. Coming up, we're going to be talking about Rachel from Accounts and what she's planning to do in her speech later on today. No doubt the word growth will be mentioned. I wonder if we could run a book on how many times the word growth is actually mentioned. Keir Starmer keeps talking about it. Should we have a look at what he said earlier?
For growth, which is the number one priority of this government, growing our economy, wealth creation. We turn the economy around, get the growth that we need, which I'm absolutely certain we can get. What I will say is that growth is the number one priority of this government. Economic growth, wealth creation, making sure that people are better off. Growth, 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 growth.
What an absolute plum. Growth is the number one priority. No, it isn't. Taking people's money off them and putting it into your back pocket would appear to be the priority of this government. I'm not buying that you want growth because you don't know how to do it, you complete and utter numpty. All you've ever done is ever work in the public sector where you haven't had to actually make any ends meet. So don't talk to me about growth, matey. You know, I run a business and you're taxing it out of oblivion. So I'm sorry, I'm not going for it. Anyway, it is 7:20 in the morning. The sun is yet to rise, but it looks a bit more bright than it did yesterday, I have to say. This is Morning Glory. We'll see you after this.
Government borrowing costs hit a 27-year high, and the pound is taking a pounding. Gloomy economic data is expected to show inflation and growth are off course.
Let me ask again, and can you please be clear? Will Rachel Reeves be your Chancellor for the duration of this Parliament?
Rachel Reeves is doing a fantastic job. She has my full confidence, and she has the full confidence of the entire party.
Can Rachel Reeves hold on as Chancellor?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
That, ladies and gentlemen, is a representation of our government. These are the people who are running this country. Alan in Merseyside says, how can anybody take Labour seriously after all the lies they've told? The last lie is Starmer's promise on council tax. That was what we were talking about yesterday, because he had said, before they were elected, basically, not a penny more will you be charged for your council tax. Under Labour, you will not have a council tax rise. And it turns out that that was absolutely and utterly nonsensical, because now council tax is not just going up by a factor of 5%, but it's going up by 10%. In some places going up by 15%. In other places going up by 25%. This from Dallas on the subject of litter. Morning, Mike. I'm old enough to remember when there were bobbies on the beat who had the power to hand out spot 10-shilling fines for litter dropping, and they made you pick it up and dispose of it correctly. If you didn't have 10 bob on you, you could be arrested for vagrancy. You know, we have a very untidy country. And I know that some people will say, you know, this is a national radio station, this is a national television station. What are you doing talking about litter? Because it's how you live. It's about how the surroundings of your life are actually, you know, looked after. And I find now that there's more litter every single place I go, certainly in London, than anywhere else in the world. When I go to Montenegro, when I go to Spain, when I go to Italy, when I go to America, you just don't see the same level of litter that you see here. What's the problem? I don't understand it. But don't worry, Rachel Reeves is coming up later on this morning to talk about growth. She's going to try and sell you the idea that she's working on building the economy. She's working on creating an incredible amount of growth, an incredible amount of prosperity for this country. I'm not sure that anyone with any brains would actually buy that. Let's talk to Chris Southworth, who's Secretary General of the International Chamber of Commerce here in the UK. Chris, very good morning to you.
Morning.
Are you buying this idea that Rachel Reeves knows anything about growth and how to create it?
I think she's doing absolutely the right thing in pushing everybody to go further, faster. We're also saying the same message, that we need to be much more ambitious, much more can-do. But she is reliant on the regulators, government, business to respond to that challenge. There's an awful lot of opportunity for us to grow the economy, a lot of which is actually around the reform agenda. So what the government is doing around the planning, regulations, housing, the same, is good. Taking on Heathrow, the airports and infrastructure is also good. I'd like to see a lot more on the trade front. That's £1 trillion of our economy. It's suffocating in bureaucracy, over-regulation, an antiquated system. There's an enormous economic opportunity to rip through some of that, slash a lot of the inefficiency, and really unlock a tremendous amount of trade finance into the economy, especially for small business, and get the economy trading again.
Yeah, but every small business I talk to says to me that they're going to be looking at a huge increase in their costs over time, particularly when it comes into April, where they're going to have to pay more for national insurance to all of the employees that they employ. The minimum wage will affect not everybody, but will certainly affect quite a lot of businesses in this country. which is hardly going to stimulate growth, is it? Because people are going to say, we haven't got the money to invest in anything.
Well, the backdrop's tough. I mean, I think every business would relate to what you've just said there and what other businesses say. I mean, we hear it all the time too. But we've got to be positive. We've got to be.
Well, you can't be positive when but hang on, Chris, hang on a second. How can you be positive if you're being faced with an increase in costs of somewhere between, say, $250,000 for some businesses, up to maybe 4 million for other businesses? You haven't got the money to invest. You can't grow the economy by taxing businesses more than you did before, surely.
Well, growing the economy is about a lot more than that. What we should be doing, and what I think what the Chancellor is trying to do, is pull all levers available to government. And a lot of that is around regulatory reform. There's an awful lot that can happen around the policy landscape as well. Going back to trade again, we have a roadmap. We know exactly what needs to be done. The wins are short term. We can deliver growth quickly. But we've got to get on with it, and we've got to take action straight away, and we've got to respond to the challenge to go further faster. I fully agree with that.
Well, yeah, but that's all just gobbledygook, isn't it? I mean, you're talking in kind of riddles. You're saying go further, go faster, you know, employ more people, you know, stimulate the economy, get involved in trade. Who's going to do that when they've got less money than they had last year?
We don't need money to do it. Like I say,
so you don't need money to create growth.
Every single action that needs to be taken to drive the trade economy. We don't need any money to do that for the most part, but we need to get on and remove.
All right. So who's going to grow? Who's going to grow the economy, and how are they going to do it?
In terms of trade.
Well, in terms of whatever it is you're talking about, because I don't really understand what you're saying. How is the economy going to grow exactly?
So if you look at trade finance plays a fundamental role in financing and enabling trade. Very, very important.
Trade with who?
Suffocating in.
Well, trade with who?
Sorry?
Trade with who?
The rest of the world.
So you want? So who's going to create the products that you're going to sell to the rest of the world?
Business. We've got plenty of business.
Well, can you be more specific? Which companies are going to do it, or which industries are going to do it?
We've got thousands of good companies all up and down the country who trade every day of the week.
Right.
That could be trading more. Terrific brands. There's huge markets out there around the world. You know, we shouldn't put ourselves in a hole. The UK has tremendous amount of talent. There's a lot of demand for that talent overseas. I hear that all the time. But we've just got to make that process easier. That's what I'm talking about. Trade is very bureaucratic in today's world.
Well, why am I not hearing this? And why am I not hearing this argument from any particular companies?
Well, that's why I'm coming on to help make that.
But you're not speaking on behalf of a company. I mean, I'm hearing from Jaguar, for example, or I'm not hearing from, you know, any kind of, you know, British organised, you know, companies.
Well, I'm the International Chamber of Commerce. We represent 45 million companies in 170 countries, including almost all the top-tier UK largest trading companies.
Right.
They're all supporting.
Well, so can you tell me which of those companies are being somehow hampered at the moment by not being able to trade with people that Rachel Reeves is going to suddenly help by lifting some veil of restriction on them?
Well, all small companies are struggling to access finance. The cost of capital has gone up, and that's mostly because it's over-regulated, and the processes that sit behind it are very bureaucratic. Reform those issues and push on the regulators to be much more ambitious on trade, and we'll see a lot more.
Yeah, but most small companies are complaining. But most small companies are right now complaining that they can't operate in the same way that they would have done because they're being restricted because of the excessive costs that are being put upon them by this Labour administration. You know, I spoke to the guy who runs Brewdog the other day, which is a pretty decent, I would say, a homegrown British company. You know, makes a lot of money for this government, makes a lot of money for the Exchequer. The guy who runs it says to me that actually this is the worst an atmosphere for starting a company in the history of the country. He said it's the worst time ever to try and run a business, and he's worried for the future of this economy because so many people are going to be laid off because they can't afford to be employed.
The operating environment is tough. I'm not going to disagree with some of that. What I'm saying is there are opportunities. We must take them. We must make decisions and we must take action. But there is an awful lot of opportunity to drive growth and productivity across the economy, but particularly in the trade economy, which is really suffers from antiquated systems and processes. and ways of transacting.
Well, when will we see the benefit of this? When will we see the benefit of this growth that is going to be spoken about today?
From our projections, you'll see benefits year 1, year 2, year 3, certainly within the terms of this Parliament. I'm talking about short-term, immediate actions, not long-term 10-year plans, which also need to be made. But I think we do need short-term actions in order to then drive trade growth. That's what I'm talking about.
But would you not agree with me that by putting up national insurance contributions and by putting up the minimum wage, that is difficult for businesses, particularly small businesses, and it's going to create a less welcome environment for making money and for growing the economy?
I don't disagree. It's a tough environment, but I think you've got to...
No, but was it the wrong thing? No, I'm asking you if it was the wrong thing to do.
I'm not going to say whether it was the wrong thing to do or not. I think the government had to make some tough decisions, and for business it is hard. There's no question about it. We feel the same pain ourselves. So I'm not going to disagree with that, but I don't think you can just only focus on those issues. We've got to focus on the opportunities where we can make a difference and make it easier for business and drive down on those costs, because there are lots of opportunities to do that. But it won't happen unless we push it and drive it to happen. And I think the call from the Chancellor is a good one. We must respond to it. I think we need to push much harder.
Do you think she's doing a good job, Chris?
I think she's in probably the toughest job in the country right now. And
it's a yes or no answer. You can say yes or no.
10 years of very stagnant type of growth and activity. I think
the economy was better in June, was it not? Was the economy not better in June than it is now?
We've had 10 years in the trade side. It's been a disaster for 10 years, absolute disaster, and you can see that in all the figures, the numbers, the data. It's got to get
that's not actually right. That's not actually true, is it? Are you going to tell me it's because? Are you going to tell me it's because of Brexit that we're in a bad place? Are you going to tell me that now?
That certainly played a role for the UK. There's much bigger trends out there.
Do you think we should rejoin the European Union?
That's not for me, or I don't think it's even for my generation necessarily. That's for the future. But we've got to acknowledge that for trade, it was calamitous. It imposed a tremendous amount of red tape on the borders, especially in Europe.
Okay. All right, Chris. I think you're talking an absolute pile of absolute cobblers. Sorry, I've got to let you go. Chris Southworth, International Chamber of Commerce UK. Doesn't seem to know much about business. I don't know. We'll talk to Richard Tice after this. He might have a view. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 7:37. Let's get a voice note from Andy.
Good morning, Mike. Andy in Portsmouth. Just on the weight loss pills they're giving to the squaddies and stuff. I left school in 1986, went to join the Navy, went to the Naval Careers Office, and he basically said, yeah, you're too fat, you need to lose some weight. So I didn't bother, but I respected the fact that you had to be fit to get in there. So you've only got to look at the police and that nowadays. I mean, to join the police force used to be about 6 foot tall and be fit as a fiddle.
Yeah.
Half of them look like eggs on legs. Great show, Mike.
I know. It's absolutely mad, isn't it, Andy? Thank you very much for that. It is incredibly bonkers, is it not, that we now have weight loss drugs being given to members of the armed forces. You know, sorry, you know, just, you know, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, left, right, left, right. What happened to that? Has that all disappeared now? Is there no sergeant majors anymore? Look at you, you horrible little lot. Apparently not. Let's talk to Richard Tice, because I need to talk to somebody sensible. That last bloke did my head in. Chris Southworth, Secretary-General of the International Chamber of Commerce. No wonder Britain's in the bloody toilet. Richard, a very good morning to you.
Well, having listened to your previous guest, I'm not sure I can use the word good, but it is certainly morning after the night before.
I mean, forgive me for dismissing everything that he said, but, I mean, did he say anything that was of any use to man or beast at all?
I think he was living in a parallel universe, to be honest. I've never come across the International Chamber of Commerce UK. It sounds just like some form of quangocracy. It really does.
Yeah.
And he was just completely out of touch with the reality of what's going on in the world. You've only got to look at today's newspapers. There's another 10,000 jobs under threat from a retail organisation that's right on the edge. You've got big supermarkets laying people off. I mean, the job numbers, let's just remember the job numbers in December were the worst month on record since before the pandemic.
Yeah.
All of the crises has been caused by a combination of the great blunder budget of Rachel from Accounts, which perpetuated the carnage that this government has been handed by the con-socialist conservative government, previous one, I'm afraid, and the levels of taxation and regulation. And now what you're seeing is basically Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves panicking, talking about long-term issues like a third runway at Heathrow that wouldn't be built for 20 or 30 years and will make no difference to the economic crisis we face this year and next year.
Exactly. And she's going to get up at some point this morning, probably during Julie Hartley-Brewer's show, and she's going to convince us, or try to convince us, that she keeps saying the word growth, and if you keep saying it often enough, people will believe it. But there is nothing that Rachel Reeves is doing to promote growth in the economy that I can see. Can you?
Nothing at all. In fact, it's exactly the opposite. Let's remember that many of the measures from that blunder budget have yet to actually take effect. Some of the increases take effect from April, such as the increase in national insurance and much more. And that's why businesses are adjusting their employment levels and, sadly, laying people off and not hiring people. What they should do is they should basically admit they got it badly wrong, scrap the whole blunder budget and start again with a short-term budget. And they've got to, and the other great thing they can do is, of course, which they won't do, is scrap net zero. You do those two things and this will turn around very quickly. But they're obsessed with net zero, as are the Tories, and you simply cannot grow. No one's grown an economy heading towards net zero at the rate we are. I think the only example of it was Sri Lanka, that basically went bust and into complete starving impoverishment. So
Fantastic.
It's not a great example.
Well, I mean, Richard, I mean, you've been in business for a long time. You've worked within the various frameworks that we've had over the years. I mean, they're talking about, you know, lifting all these regulations. Keir Starmer's written in the Times today talking about lifting regulations and sort of creating this incredible opportunity, just like that last bloke, Chris Southworth, who seemed to think that, you know, international trade would suddenly be eased if suddenly so-called regulations were lifted. I mean, is there a problem with regulations in this country?
There is a massive problem with regulation, and huge swathes of it need to be literally just chucked in the bin. Don't tweak it, don't fiddle around the edges. You just got to scrap whole swathes of it that are a huge block for business. It's a regulator's paradise, and they regulate for regulation's sake. So, yeah, there is a major crisis, but there's no way the Labour Party that love regulation, they love big statist, tick box type culture. There's no way they're going to touch the sides, particularly when I look at the Labour MPs opposite in the House of Commons. I mean, a lot of them have come from regulators. No. They've come from unions. They've come from all these wonky think tanks types that create this regulation. So they're not going to do it. They might talk the talk. We've heard it all before. We used to hear it from the Tories, and you never see any action. And the only thing that happens is the country heads down the loop.
Right. And I mean, how much can this country kind of, you know, withstand, if you like, in terms of the level of investment which is not coming into the country now, the levels of borrowing that are going on, you know, £17.8 billion alone back in December for 1 month, you know, the biggest December borrowing since COVID and since before that, 2009. You know, how much more of this kind of wrecking of the economy can the country stand before we are the laughing stock of the world?
We already are the laughing stock of the world, I regret to inform you and listeners and viewers, as people steal our jobs and our money, and as smart people leave the country. So that's already baked in. How long we can carry on like this financially before the markets rebel and say we're done, I don't know, but it is sometime within the lifetime of this Parliament. We are heading towards going bust. We're heading towards bankruptcy. We need to be under no illusion about that whatsoever. You cannot keep spending more than you're earning as a nation and expect the markets to continue to bail you out when there's no growth, and we are likely heading into some scale of recession. And from everything I hear from people in the world of business, and I was with some business people last night, the omens are bad, very bad indeed.
They really
are. People will tell me I'm talking it down. The thing is, actually, you can't prescribe the solution and the right medicine to the problem until you're honest and identify what the problem is.
No.
And we know what the problem is. We're telling it as it is, and that might upset some people. It might concern some people, but we've just got to face hard facts. We are heading towards a seriously difficult place, and that reality has to be faced up to by the government in charge, and it just won't be by this lot. I mean, I've never known such a clueless bunch. I really haven't.
No, I know. It's absolutely incredible. And there's nothing wrong with describing what we are currently going through. It's not about talking down the country. It's not about talking down anything. It's about just recognising where we are. I mean, for example, the population explosion, which is currently going on. We were told yesterday by the Office for National Statistics that by 2032, we will have a population of 72.5 million. I think that is wildly underestimating what is actually going on. I think we've already got upwards of 70 million here already, and so the idea that in the next sort of 6 years or so we're only going to get another couple of million, I think we're going to have another 5 or possibly another 10 million.
Oh, these forecasts, they're always underestimates. They've always been hugely exceeded. And this is the same ONS, of course, that told us that the number that came into the country to June 23 was 670 or 80,000. And then a year later told us, I'm so sorry, chaps, we got the number wrong by a mere 230,000. It was actually 910,000. Why would anybody believe what these population forecasts show? I agree with you. I think we're already at 70 million.
Yeah.
It feels it just travelling around.
Exactly. And now more people, Richard, in Britain than there are in France, which is twice the size.
At least twice the size. No, I think the population growth will be way in excess of those numbers until we have a change of government. This government won't put an immigration target on. We're quite clear that, and that's the difference with reform. We identify the problem. Yes, it might sound tough, it might sound grim, but then we say, but this is how you solve it. And the way to solve the population crisis is to have net zero immigration and to learn lessons from the new president of the United States, President Trump. And he's going to show us the way over the next couple of years in a variety of different areas, whether it's immigration, whether it's regulation, whether it's scrapping net zero. They're going to be growing like gangbusters. We're all going to be jealous as we head south. And then people will wake up and say, actually, in order to go positive again, become better off and more prosperous, we've got to dramatically change course, and there'll be a major wake-up call.
Yeah, absolutely right. Richard, good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Richard Tice, Deputy Leader of Reform UK, MP, of course, for Skegness, which somebody suggested the other day is going to be underwater in about 20 years. Another load of old cobblers from the old climate brigade, right? Yeah, they told us that half of London would be underwater back in 1989. They said by 2020, Canary Wharf won't exist. Yeah, well, it's still there, unfortunately, for some of us who don't really like it that much. Coming up, it's 7:47. Let's get a voice note from Elaine.
Morning, Mike. Keir Starmer wants to be like Margaret Thatcher. Oh, my God. He's the one that took her photo down in number 10, isn't he? Good show, Mike. Bye for now.
Yeah, there's so many kind of incongruities, if you might say. There's so many hypocrisy moments for this government. And he's now saying he's going to be like Margaret Thatcher, going to slash away at the regulations. Richard Tice just said there are lots of regulations, and maybe that's a good idea. But is it actually going to create any growth? If you're running a business, you're not going to be too happy about it right now. It's 7:48. Coming up, we're going to talk to Geoffrey Clifton-Brown about the NHS, which is absolutely falling down around its ears.
Home Office, so mainly Yvette Cooper, and it's like an internal report that they asked to happen. And this report has basically come back with all these findings about the definition of extremism and just lots of kind of crime and home affairs issues. But then what's happened with this report is that it seems as if the Home Office have kind of rejected all of the information and the recommendations in this report. So that kind of begs the question of what the purpose of commissioning this report was in the first place.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's coming up to 7:52 in the morning. We've been here almost 2 hours. The sun is up. It's actually looking all right, bizarrely. It's not actually raining, which is nice. It makes a pleasant change from the torrential torrents of ghastliness that happened yesterday. Let's talk now to Sir Geoffrey Clifton-Brown, Conservative MP for the North Cotswold area, because Sir Geoffrey, we've been given a report by the investigators of the NHS, and we are told that the NHS is not only not fit for purpose, but it's sort of getting worse and nobody's doing anything about fixing it. Whatever happened to Wes Streeting?
Well, good morning, Mike. Great to be on your show again. As you say, I'm chairman of the PAC, Public Accounts Committee, and we've just produced a very critical report on the NHS. As we all know, as you've said in your introduction, and indeed the government has admitted, Wes Streeting has admitted, the NHS is broken.
Yeah.
So we've come up with a number of tough recommendations as to help the government as to how they might fix it. And I suppose the one thing they ought to do more than anything else is improve their productivity. Instead of keep asking for more money every time they get into a problem, actually use the money that they've got, but use it more effectively. So up till 2020, they were running at about 0.6% efficiency, and it's dropped considerably since then, partly because of the pandemic, but they've never really recovered properly, as we all know, from the pandemic. So they should increase their productivity, and that's nothing to do with the hard-working doctors and nurses. It's the way it's run. And then the second thing they must do is to actually try and spend more money on prevention. We all know if you can prevent people getting into the health service, it's a lot cheaper and it's a lot better for the patients. And instead of what they're doing at the moment, they're cutting the grant for prevention. So that's another thing they must do. And the third thing they must do is to help the local organisations, the integrated healthcare boards locally, the doctors, the dentists and everything else, and give them money at an earlier time. At the moment, they're giving it several months after the year end. But if they give them earlier, as local authorities do, then those boards can plan properly and provide a good service. So there's a lot of things in there. We could help the National Health Service, and by goodness, it needs helping.
Well, the big question, of course, is exactly what will happen after this report comes out. You know, will the NHS take any notice of it? Will they actually do anything about it? Will they action any of the suggestions that you've got? A piece of The Sun today, on page 17, which I think we're looking at right now, shocking picture exposes the depth of the A&E crisis. It's a picture from Ashford in Kent, the William Harvey Hospital, and you've just got a line after line after line after line of patients in the corridors of the hospital, because there isn't any room to put them in a proper ward or to see them in any way, shape or form in A&E. Everything's full.
Well, that's quite shocking, Mike. It really is. And as you say, will anything happen? Well, the process now is, as far as we're concerned, is we produce a report which we have with these quite tough recommendations.
Yes.
They have to constitutionally respond within 6 weeks as to whether they accept these recommendations or not.
Right.
And if they do accept them, we'll follow them up to make sure that they're doing them. If they don't accept them, we'll look very hard at the reasons why they've not accepted them, and then we'll, if necessary, have them back before the Public Accounts Committee to account for themselves. But as I say, they released a fairly, unusually, a press release at a peak because they didn't like our tough recommendations. So I don't know. We'll have to wait and see what happens as a result of our report. But we won't leave this subject. We'll keep, as it were, knocking on their door to make sure they really start to actually transform the health service. And there are ways it could be done. And for example, the last government gave them $3.6 billion to transform their technology. And that would have a revolutionising effect in the health service. There's still far too much paper. They're still using faxes. If they stopped all that and did it efficiently electronically, as, for example, Denmark has done, we really could transform the health service. So there are things they can do, but they've got to have the will to want to do it.
Absolutely. And I've been hearing these stories about them using fax machines for years now, and why on earth they haven't changed that practice, I've no idea. But can't you also rope in Wes Streeting into this conversation to see whether he's got something to say about your report, whether he's got something to suggest about how they should action it?
Well, I hope you'll look at our report carefully, because it's critical for a reason. It's critical because we want the health service to change and get better. So we're actually trying to help Wes Streeting and the government. We all, whatever our political colours, want to see the health service succeed. We want it to provide a better service for all of us. So I hope the government will take our report very seriously and act on its recommendations.
Yeah, well, that would be nice, wouldn't it? And I mean, in terms of the way that this government is generally going, I mean, we've got a big set piece today with Rachel Reeves getting up to talk about growth. I don't think anyone in the world of common sense believes a word of what she says about trying to make growth happen, when we know that coming in April is a massive blow to small businesses and to big businesses as well. The minimum wage is going up, which is no bad thing in and of itself. But in addition to that, we've also got the national insurance increases that are going on, and an awful lot of business people are telling me that they will not be able to survive this year.
Well, I agree with that. I think that small businesses are in a very difficult position at the moment, and they are, after all, the engine of growth of this country. They make up 90% of all business collectively. So if you don't help small businesses, it's going to make it much more difficult to actually get this growth. So let's see what Rachel Reeves can do to help them. As you say, she's put a huge if you keep sucking money out of a business in tax, it hasn't got the money to invest and actually perform better and better in the future. So I think the government do have a problem, but as I say, in this particular report, we want to make sure that the huge amount of money that the health service already gets is spent better, more productively, on behalf of all of us, the patients.
Well, that would be nice, wouldn't it? So Geoffrey Clifton-Brown, Conservative MP for North Cotswolds, thank you very much indeed. Also, of course, a member of the Public Accounts Committee, which has come out with some revelatory information. It's not particularly surprising, but it basically says that the NHS is not fit for purpose. It's out of ideas. Officials are complacent, and when it comes to transforming the health service for patients. We've been talking about the NHS for a very long time, and I'd like to talk about it some more today. So I'd like to welcome your calls, because one of the reasons why A&E departments, as has been exposed in Kent in the Sun today, are so overcrowded is because people are going to A&Es because they can't get themselves treated anywhere else. They can't find a doctor, they can't get a doctor's appointment, they can't get a GP. If they do have a GP, they can't get to see the GP. They end up going to A&E because they have no other option. And that, I'm afraid, is the problem. Wes Streeting has gone very quiet, considering what he used to say before the election and how he was going to transform the NHS, and now they had a plan. They were going to hit the ground running. It was all fully costed. And all he did was he basically gave a load of money to people who had gone on strike in the health service for very many months of the previous year. Junior doctors who are going to probably go on strike again. It's ridiculous, isn't it? 0344 499 1000 is the number. This is Morning Glory. Loads more coming up after the news.
Spoke with His Majesty the King to request the dissolution of Parliament, and we will have a general election on the 4th of July.
I have just returned from Buckingham Palace to form the next government of this great nation.
Take a look at what happened. I immediately knew it was very serious, that we were under attack.
The time has come, and this surely is England's time. Williams, who scores, and Spain lead. The shot from distance is in. It is Cole Palmer. Low ball in on far ball, slides it in.
An absolute killer of a goal.
I agree with the protest, but I don't think the violence was anywhere near necessary.
No, I mean, I don't think anyone, Nigel, would ever think that the violence was the answer at all.
אזרחי ישראל, אנחנו במלחמה.
I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me.
If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats.
Liberal left couldn't understand that this man could be anything other than the great newsreader, a man of integrity.
Is it possible in any way, shape or form that Keir Starmer didn't know about these facts about the suspects in Southport?
I find it extraordinary that he wouldn't know. It seems that the public has not been told the truth.
No. There's nothing like an American election, I have to say. North Dakota has gone red, South Dakota's red, Texas is red.
Many people have told me that God spared my life for a reason.
Bloomberg UK reporting Ukraine has made the first long-range missile strike inside of Russia.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. Coming up to 3 minutes past 8. I'm Mike Graham. The sun is shining. The sun has risen, and it's actually not bad out there. If you're travelling into school, if you're travelling to work, if you're travelling anywhere, driving for a living, you may well be doing that. You might be stuck in traffic because, of course, that's what, generally speaking, is now the going concern here in the UK. If you're trying to get to an airport, good luck to you. And if you're trying to use a train, absolutely well done, but do let us know if you've got any problems and we can pass them on to everybody else. We've got a lot of good messages coming in. We had a slight blockage in the system, but I'm going to start reading them out very, very shortly. Coming up very shortly as well, we're going to be speaking to Ryan Saby, Deputy Political Editor at The Sun. This morning, Rachel Reeves is going to be setting out her stall. She's going to be trying to convince everybody, as if we didn't need convincing, that growth is the order of the day. She keeps talking about wanting to create growth in the United Kingdom. She keeps saying that she's going to make growth happen. She keeps saying that she's doing all the right things and pulling all the levers to make sure that growth is a going concern. But so far, all she seems to have come up with is a third runway at Heathrow, which is going to take a minimum of 7 to 10 years to build, a minimum of that time to actually see any kind of interest at all from airlines. And I don't know whether that really is the be-all and end-all, or the golden ticket, if you like, to growing the UK economy. The UK economy is a very bad place. It's in a much worse place now than it was in June, when the Conservative Party was still running this country. And I make no apologies for saying this. The Conservative Party did a terrible job of running many things, but they didn't do such a terrible job of running the economy. It now turns out that Rachel Reeves has crashed the economy. She doesn't want to admit it, unfortunately. Let's get a voice note from Chris.
Good morning, Mike. It's Chris in Northampton here. Enjoying the show, but I'm going to have to take it to task, mate. I mean, you keep going on about Keir Starmer and his growth. We've got plenty of growth. Growth in migration hotels, growth in the tax burden, growth in unemployment, growth in interest rates, growth in waiting lists on the NHS. I mean, I could go on, but crikey, people, how much growth do you want?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. There's a lot of growth out there, but it's not the kind of growth that we do want. That's the problem. Let it grow. As that's sold by Eric Clapton. Front page of The Sun says 10 million more are going to move here in 10 years. That's the operation from the National Statistics Organisation. They came out with that yesterday, and they basically said that by 2032, we're going to have 72.5 million people living in Britain, which is more people than live in France, which is twice the size of Britain. So that's one part of growth that is not happening. I also think that we're also probably at that figure already. 0344 499 1000 is the number. This is Morning Glory. There's plenty of growth here. We've got a bigger audience than we had yesterday. This is Talk. Tracy says this: Mike, no matter how bad the news is, you always make me chuckle. That's good. The NHS sent me a first-class letter to tell me I'd be getting a bowel screening kit in 2 weeks. Why not just send the kit with the explanation and save the postage? Is it just me? Says Tracy in Staffordshire. Well, I mean, I suppose you might say it's good that they're doing that. It's good that they're sending these kits out. They sent me one the other week, and I just completely ignored it. They don't need to do it. If you want one, go and get one. If you ask to do a test, go and do your test. But, you know, they should not be sending out these bowel kits to everybody willy-nilly just because they think they might want to take a test. It's nonsense, isn't it? Let's talk to Gareth Davis, MP, Shadow Secretary to the Treasury. He is a man who knows a thing or two about finance, and let's ask him if Rachel Reeves' speech this morning is going to result in any growth whatsoever in the economy. Gareth, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike.
Well, what are we expecting from Rachel Reeves today? She's going to talk about growth a lot. She's going to mention the word growth a lot. But I don't see any growth. Do you?
Well, I think what it comes down to is the biggest blockage to economic growth is Rachel Reeves herself. Look at what she's done over the last 6 months. She's hit businesses with a massive tax bombshell that nobody expected, that she said she wouldn't do before the election, with national insurance contributions. She's reduced reliefs, such as business rates relief, which impacts our high street businesses.
Yeah.
They talked down the economy for 6 months, and then all of a sudden today, you know, Keir Starmer's Margaret Thatcher talking up the economy. It's all, you know, just a little bit too late, I'm afraid. And these announcements that they may or may not make today, we've not seen any real detail yet until the speech happens. But these are investments that I think we can probably get behind if we see the detail of it, because we want more infrastructure. But these are things that are going to happen in the 2030s and 40s. Businesses are hurting today because they're cutting staff on the back of tax rises. And that's the problem with this Labour government at the moment.
Well, that is the problem, because all the small businesses I talk to, people who run hospitality, restaurants, nightclubs, bars, and people who run just ordinary family businesses are saying, you know, our costs are going to go up massively in April. And we're already suffering because the economy is not doing terribly well, but it's going to get a lot worse from April, because we're going to have to start paying up more in national insurance. We're going to have to pay more in minimum wage. You know, it's a massive squeeze on our profits, and in fact we may have no profits whatsoever come the end of the year.
Well, that's absolutely right about the April, Mike. You're quite right to highlight this. We've seen that growth has declined since Labour came to power, to the extent that it's, you know, I think we left them with the highest in the G7. It wasn't huge growth. We were on a path to higher growth, but I think it was 0.7% growth, but now it's gone down to zero growth, right? So it's already declined. But that's before these massive tax hikes have actually had time to bite, which is going to be in April. And so we've got this potent combination of a lack of confidence from businesses in this government and in our economy, sadly, while at the same time their costs are going up, and so they're freezing employment. Those people that they wanted to hire to be able to grow, they've frozen those, and in some instances they're going to have to lay people off, which is meaning that unemployment's going to go up, which of course hurts the economy. And so it's this potent combination which is very, very damaging, and they need to urgently get a grip of this.
Yeah, they really do, but I'm not sure they know how to do that, to be honest. But listen, good to talk to you, Gareth. Thank you very much indeed. Gareth Davis, MP, Shadow Secretary to the Treasury. Let's just check in with Rachel from Accounts to check out why she is qualified to do this job as Chancellor of the Exchequer. Is it because she's an economist?
Well, I'm an economist. I studied economics. I got a master's in economics from the London School of Economics, and I worked as an economist at the Bank of England.
Brilliant. Apparently she's an economist. How about this from Tony, who says, Mike, an extra 10 million people are here now, plus an extra 5 million. In the 70s, we had 423,600 hospital beds with a population of 55 million or so, 55.5 million. We now have 101,000 hospital beds with a population of 67,961. So where will all the extra hospital beds come from with an extra 5 million people? Plus, if they take an English language test to get British citizenship, why does the NHS need to pay for translators that allow them to jump the waiting list? Well, it's a very good question, Tony. Basically, what we're saying is that one of the reasons, and I've been saying this for many years, that the NHS is failing is because there's too many people in the country trying to access it. Many more people than used to try and access it, because we've got many more people now living here. The Sun has got it on the front page this morning. 10 million more move here in 10 years. More immigrants in the UK within a decade, according to the new projections from the National Office of Statistics. Let's talk to Ryan Saby, Deputy Political Editor of The Sun. Ryan, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike.
Good to talk to you. Good story in The Sun this morning, because you've basically taken those figures that we got around about 9:30 yesterday morning and you've extrapolated them to say that we've now got more people living in Britain than there are in France. La Grande Bretagne is what it says.
Yeah, that's right. If you compare the numbers, it is it's going to be difficult for this country almost to cope, because if you look at geographically, obviously France is much bigger than this country, and you pose the question, where simply do you physically put everyone,
right,
and what do you do with those services? Healthcare, housing, all transport, all these things come into play. How does the country cope?
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. And we know for a fact from living in London that London has got an awful lot more busy. Even in the last 5 years, I've noticed it. You know, the trains are busier, the roads are busier, the hospitals are busier, you know, the schools are busier. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to work out that the population has grown. But the population hasn't grown as a result of more people being born here. It's grown as a result of more people coming here from elsewhere.
Yeah, that's right. When you sort of dig down into these figures, the birth rate and the death rate almost cancel each other out. And I think one of the concerning thing that there aren't enough births and enough babies being born in this country is a lot of younger people that don't have that sort of stability, can't get on the problem of they're getting on the housing ladder, and it just creates big problems for society in general. But as you say, those figures show that the most of the numbers, that big sort of 5 million over the next 10 years or so, is coming from abroad, and that's why lots of people, Nigel Farage, for example, Kemi Badenoch, are talking about a numerical cap to actually cap the numbers of people come to this country. Now, Downing Street were very quick to slap that down yesterday, but some people see that maybe ultimately that is the only answer, because the numbers are just more and more out of control.
And also, as we see what's happening in America, and as we look across the pond, and we now know that Keir Starmer and Donald Trump have at least opened a dialogue. Where that goes, nobody's sure. Where Keir Starmer goes, we're not sure if he goes to America in the next few weeks or months. But he must be looking now at the way that Donald Trump is dealing with their illegal migration problem, sending people back to Colombia, threatening Colombia with all sorts of sanctions if they didn't take them back. You know, he must be looking at that thinking, crikey, I'm going to get put under pressure pretty soon to do something similar.
Yeah, I imagine that was a bit of a wake-up call when he saw that. Donald Trump, as he always does, the businessman, putting those hardball tactics to Colombia and saying, look, we're going to impose tariffs if you don't actually take these people back. Now, the trouble is with Keir Starmer, I just don't think that's kind of in his nature to do that. And lots of people who we may want to be sending back to whichever country that they come from, I just can't see that sort of being on the table with him. But what you can see, I think, is that maybe politicians and ministers trying to set up more sort of bilateral deals and agreements to actually try and sort of fast track to get the people back home. But in terms of those hardball tactics, I think Sir Keir Starmer will be steering clear of that.
Well, he will, but the pressure will no doubt rise, though, if Trump keeps doing it. And here's a word from Caroline Leavitt, who's the Trump sort of press spokeswoman. Here's what she has to say about talking about illegal migrants.
Of the 3,500 arrests ICE has made so far since President Trump came back into office, can you just tell us the numbers? How many have a criminal record versus those who are just in the country illegally?
All of them, because they illegally broke our nation's laws and therefore they are criminals as far as this administration goes. I know the last administration didn't see it that way, so it's a big culture shift in our nation to view someone who breaks our immigration laws as a criminal, but that's exactly what they are.
And so that basically re-enters the argument that people used to have here, and we don't really hear it that much anymore, but that people who actually arrive on the shores of this country illegally are breaking the law. You know, they're not seeking asylum, they're actually criminals.
Yeah, that's right. And under the previous government, those arriving here illegally would be, effectively they'd be trying to be sent back straight away. Now that seemed that didn't actually happen in the end. They tried with the Rwanda flights and they couldn't quite get that to part. But just hearing that sort of stark language used by the press secretary there, it's a tactic and it's a wake-up call. But I think that one thing that Sir Keir Starmer and the rest of the government really have to try and do is crack down on on the sort of, we've got the illegal migration, we've got legal migration as well. It's the legal migration just dwarfs the numbers on illegal migration. Really want to tackle anything, they have to bring down that and create some new visa rules to actually try and bring down the numbers.
Absolutely. And the big set piece for the government today is Rachel Reeves. You know, she's sort of been back into the limelight after her weekend in front of the cameras, doing loads of interviews on the regular sort of BBC morning show and Sky and all the rest of it. She's now going to attempt to tell us how she's going to grow the economy at some point this morning in a speech. Is that going to work, do you think?
Well, I think it may work if you've got 10, 15 or 20 years to wait for everything to come to fruition. Yeah. Now, things like Heathrow Plan, Gatwick, Luton Airport, East West Rail, now they are fantastic ideas. They will lead to growth, and one would hope that maybe it would lead to investment along the way as they are being built. But until we see planes taking off or landing at a third runway in Heathrow, that could be the best part of 10 years away. Yeah. And don't forget, once those plans come about and the actual sort of, we see the detail and the paperwork of all that, there's going to be a lot of objections from environmentalists, definitely when it comes to Heathrow. Let's see what the London Mayor Sadiq Khan does on that, knowing his background and his sort of threats of legal action before. Yeah. So, but also you look at Rachel Reeves talking about the number one priority being growth, and as Gareth Davis, your previous the shadow minister, said just before I came on, look at the problems that Rachel Reeves has created when it comes to national insurance. Those big problems for business that are stunting growth for them. So if they are really talking up growth, one has to question why they brought in those taxes for business. They will say they were dealt with a £22 billion black hole, but when it comes to making decisions on whether you hire people and your plans for growth when you're an individual business person, when you've got those national insurance contributions, those extra ones to pay, you're going to think twice about growing your business.
Yeah, absolutely right. There's going to be no growth there whatsoever. That's the thing that worries me slightly. Ryan Saby, Deputy Editor of The Sun, thank you very much indeed. The only growth, says Alan in Middlesbrough, is Chris Southworth's cliches for his word salad and Starmer and Rachel's noses. Well, exactly right. The problem with growth is as soon as we get some of the unions, we'll go on strike for more money, says Dave. Great show. Well, that's the thing. You know, it's all great if you work in the private sector, and the public sector rather, if you're a doctor, if you're a train driver, if you are some kind of a train operative of one kind or another, if you're a teacher, they're all getting pay rises. The rest of us are having to struggle. We're going to talk to Michael now, who's in Essex, who I think has lost his job already thanks to Rachel Reeves. Michael, very good morning to you.
Mike, I've actually lost my job at the moment. I work at Stansted Airport. Right. We're a small company of around about 30 people. Yeah. And two of us have been told we've got to go. Right. Due to the national insurance hike. Yeah. The company's cutting down on costs. Yeah. You can only say it's only two people, but, you know, how many twos are going around? Well, exactly right. The companies, you know, so we've been told 2 days ago. So. And how much time have you? How much notice have you got? Well, we've been told that we're going to be told by the 31st of Jan. Right. The result of it. Yeah, so it's only, you know, you probably only think it's two people, but, you know, at the moment, you know, the aviation industry should be busy. You know, there was a downturn in January. Right. But at the moment, January for us is just so quiet. Right. You know, there's no optimism at all. No, of course. And what will you be able to get another job doing something similar at the airport, or will you have to go somewhere else? Trouble is, Mike, I am fast approaching. I should have been retired by now, but I'm obviously previous governments and this government said I had to work on a couple of extra years, which I was quite happy to do. Right. So, and I need to do it as well. But let's wait and see, as they say, you know. Yeah, it's not great, though, is it? It's really not great. And I mean, I can't understand why the government thinks that raise it. I know they're going to raise a lot of money from this, but it's going to damage so many people's lives. Yeah, and it is small companies. I know Tesco's and Sainsbury's have all announced that they've got to do job cuts, but the smaller businesses as well, they're suffering. You know, when we are a small company, we're in aviation, but we're still a small company. Yeah. And there's still like there's going to be two people losing their jobs. Yeah. You know, and that's wrong.
Yeah, it is. Absolutely shocking. It shouldn't happen because a political decision has been made by the government. Shocking indeed. Michael, listen, I hope you find something else. If you need to find something else, do let us know. And if you can, Michael there in Essex saying that, you know, he's losing his job thanks to Rachel Reeves. You know, she calls that growth. It's not growth, is it? It's completely the opposite of growth. It's the complete demonisation of business, and it's also the complete and utter destruction of our economy. Because there may be 2 people losing their jobs in Stansted today, there'll be 200 people losing their jobs in the rest of the country probably, and maybe 2,000 people losing their jobs in the rest of the country because of the national insurance hike. Absolutely ridiculous. Paul in Fife says this, morning Mike, when we talk about the NHS, can we stop this hard-working doctors and nurses nonsense? Doctors and nurses were on strike for months and months and months. Doctors and nurses are now working part-time and do private work on their days off. We have doctors and nurses who don't want to forget who don't want to work weekends, for heaven's sake. And let's never forget the hard-working doctors and nurses who made endless videos during COVID, singing and dancing, and then lining up to applaud a COVID patient when released from hospital. They were a complicit bunch of people during COVID. Absolutely. Couldn't agree with you more. You know, this kind of lionisation of the NHS workers of this country is completely and utterly ridiculous. I know that some of them work very hard. I know that some of them do a very good job, but an awful lot of them don't. Let's put it that way. And they're no more special than anybody else. 22 minutes past 8. This is Talk.
We said 2.5% by 2030, so there'd be a steady increase in the defence budget between now and then. It would, in real terms, over those years, over £20 billion extra. Labour won't put a date on it, and until they put a date on it, it's funny money. You can't actually run the defence budget, and it's worse because they're threatening to spend £9 billion on renting back the Chagos Islands and Diego Garcia.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. 8:26 is the time, and we've got lots more to do. The economy, of course, stupid, as Bill Clinton used to say, is the big story today. Rachel Reeves is going to get up this morning and make a speech about growth. And she's going to talk about how she's building the economy, how she's drawn a line under the fiscal policies of the last government and the recklessness of their way that they were running the economy, all of which is complete and utter rubbish, all of which is complete and utter madness, because the economy now is doing far worse under Rachel Reeves than it ever did under the Tories, I'm afraid. You know, I don't hold any flag for the Tories. I didn't vote for them. I didn't think they did a particularly good job of really anything. But one of the things they did at least do was to steward the economy in a much better and more successful way than Rachel Reeves has. One of the problems as well that we're going to face in this country, of course, is not just the faltering of the economy, but the increase in the numbers of people who are here. We're going to talk to Tony Smith very shortly, columnist at The Sun today. He's a former head of UK Border Force, and we used to speak to Tony on a regular basis. Let me just read you this from Bev, who says, Mike, in Suffolk we have lots of pubs closing now due to the rise in tax and energy costs. This government could not run a party, shall we say, in a brewery. They absolutely couldn't. They're absolutely useless. Mike, one from Peter, who says, hello again, Mike. Like a lot of people, I've been aware of the poor NHS management for at least 20 years. Get rid of most of those unnecessary middle managers who are not earning, who are earning 3 times what a nurse earns. Not too difficult, is it? No, it isn't. And it shouldn't be difficult. But let's talk about migration, because the story came out yesterday. Office for National Statistics said we're going to be facing a huge increase in our population by 2032, 72.5 million. I'm going to say to you, actually, 72.5 million people are probably already here. We can count legally at least 70 million because we know those numbers are absolutely and utterly right. Tony Smith has written a piece today in The Sun on page 10, which says, take back control now. The UK cannot sustain this level of migration. We won't be able to build the homes, the hospitals, the surgeries and the schools to cope with 4.9 million more people. And it's a massive issue, this. Tony, very good morning to you. Thanks very much indeed for joining us.
Morning, Mike.
I mean, you and I have spoken many times about the problem with, you know, the porous borders that we have, the fact that we don't seem to be able to, one, stop people from coming here, and then once they get here, we don't seem to be able to send them back either. We're learning a few lessons from the United States and Donald Trump right now. But this projection of how many people we're going to have living here in this country, I think is vastly underestimated, but at the same time very worrying.
Yeah, and I think people need to understand, Mike, that this is within the government's control.
Yeah.
You know, we don't have to, it's not inevitable that this is going to happen. It kind of reads that way when you read the report, but actually 90% of immigration is controlled by our political masters who have the capability right now, if they want to shut off the visa routes. They could. Mike, we made all this up. I've worked in that department for a great many years, and I say in the piece, you know, for those 20 years or so, we had pretty level migration. The numbers coming in, the numbers going out were pretty flat-lined, and we controlled all of that. But suddenly, in the sort of 90s, late 90s, early noughties, then this new school or new wave of academic thinking came along, which said, well, actually, we should open up the doors. And even though, you know, we've been told as voters that by successive governments, oh, yes, we need more immigration, better for our economy, you know, we're going to get more growth, we're going to have better infrastructure. Well, has that actually happened, Mike?
Well, it hasn't. But that's the thing. I mean, I thought that particular myth was exploded in the early part of this year, where we found out that not only was immigration not boosting our economy, that actually, you know, the fact was that many people coming to this country as illegal migrants and even as legal migrants were not contributing on a net basis to anything like growth, because many of them were bringing dependents with them. Many of them were costing the country more money than they were sort of giving back in tax. And so, you know, I think it's time we exploded that myth about how immigration's good for the country.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it doesn't follow that more and more people are going to boost your economy.
Yeah.
Obviously, more people here can produce more output, but it should be GDP per capita, Mike. It's what are you putting in and what are you taking out? There have been a number of studies recently by economists that demonstrate that actually most of the immigration that is coming into this country is not a net contributor to our economy.
Exactly.
And those policies that you describe, you know, bringing in, you know, lower skilled workers with vast numbers of children and dependents is clear with a welfare state is going to be a significant drain on the economy. So, policy is manageable by the government of the day, but we just haven't seen any government for the last 20 years who promised to bring this down actually do it. In fact, they've done the reverse, and the year before last it was up to 900,000. It's down a bit because the Tories did do it a little bit on their way out on dependent visas and so on, but it's actually still, I think, unacceptably high. And I think most people reading these figures will be quite shocked to say, well, why is this happening?
Right.
Well, we have to happen, does it?
And why are we still such a magnet for people who come here from all over the world, who apparently have come through many safe countries? They might have landed up in Italy, which is now taking steps to stop people from landing in Italy in the first place. They might have come up through Germany, which is also now closing its borders. They might have come through Austria, which is also closing its borders. Netherlands, which is also closing its borders. They're all now making their way, even in bigger numbers, to the UK, because more and more countries in Europe are clamping down on migration of all kinds, and they figure that we're a soft touch.
Well, we do have a welfare state, don't we? We do. People here, we are like that. It's within our culture, it's within our DNA to look after people and actually give people a good opportunity. And if you are down on your luck, yes, you will get medical treatment, you will get somewhere to live, you will get help. I think that's a good thing, Mike. But actually, when that becomes reverse on the hard-working indigenous population who are having to work longer, having to work harder to pay their mortgages, to buy property, and to see more and more people coming over here who are not necessarily contributing to the economy, be that legally or illegally, then I can understand why people get angry. And this is a long time and I'm quite angry about it, because I do know that this is something largely that we can control in terms of visa policy, and we're doing it.
Yeah, we're absolutely not. Good to talk to you, Tony. Thank you very much indeed. Big piece of The Sun today at page 10. Go and get it, find it. He says this: take back control now. The UK cannot sustain this level of migration. We won't be able to build the homes, the hospitals, the surgeries and the schools to cope with 4.9 million more people, which is what's predicted to come here over the course of the next 3 years or 4 years or so. I mean, it's just ridiculous. Totally and utterly unsustainable, as we would say. Coming up, we're going to talk to Sir John Curtis, polling expert and Professor of Politics at the University of Strathclyde. I've got a couple of messages for you as well. Morning, Mike, says Peter. There has not been a leader like Thatcher since she left. I didn't agree with her on everything, but she cared about her country. Starmer is not even fit to stand in her shadows. This is, of course, on the news in the Times, that Keir Starmer thinks he's modelling himself on Margaret Thatcher by deregulating all kinds of things which are going to make the economy grow. I'm not sure he's right about that. Ernie says this: Mike, the only way Richard Reeves is going to see any growth is if she does a complete U-turn on a national insurance hike and finds the extra money somewhere else. Rachel is sometimes called Richard. I can't explain that, but have a look at Richard III and you'll get the message. It's coming up to 8:34. This is Talk.
the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 8:36. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10 o'clock. The sun is shining. I'm looking out the window here at Talk Towers. It's actually looking rather nice. It may not be quite so nice where you are, but if it is or is not, do let us know. We're going to do a conversation now with John Curtis coming up in a moment. Let's get a voice note first from Judith.
Hello, it's Judy from Altos, West Yorkshire. All this controversy over opening another runway in a London airport, it'll never get done. They've been talking about it for 30 years. Why don't the government just buy Robin Hood Airport up north and reopen that? London's so congested these days, you can't get from A to B.
Well, that's very true. And in fact, quite frankly, I mean, Robin Hood Airport is probably just a little bit further away from London than Stansted. And Stansted, of course, calls itself London Stansted. And when you get there, you get very disappointed because it's a very long way into London from there. But let's speak now to Sir John Curtis, who I think has been travelling himself from one place to another. Polling expert, of course, professor of politics, guru, indeed, of politics at the University of Strathclyde. He wrote a piece this weekend talking about how the UK's departure from the EU 5 years ago was occasioned by a 52-48 vote to leave. But in fact, if the same result was taken today, or if the same vote was taken today, more people would actually want to rejoin it. Let's find out what he's up to. So, John, a very good morning to you.
Good morning to you, Mike.
Good to talk to you, sir. So, I don't know. I mean, we hear constantly from people who didn't want us to leave the EU that they want to get back into it. And Keir Starmer was one of those people many years ago. He's not so much anymore. Tell us about your findings. What have you discovered?
Well, opinion polls have kept on being taken throughout the course of the last 5 years, asking people whether they would vote to rejoin or stay out. They don't get a great deal of publicity, but they've had a pretty clear and consistent message, certainly since around the autumn of 2022, and that is around 56-57% of people on average say they would vote to rejoin, and around 43-44% say they would vote to stay out. Indeed, I think in the period since the autumn of 2022, there is only one opinion poll that has ever put the stay out vote ahead, and then only very narrowly. So, the truth is that if you go back even further, it's probably been true since about the 2017 general election that there was a narrow majority of people who would vote to be inside the European Union. Now, I think what one should then say straight away after that is two things. One is that not very many people have changed their minds. Most of the people who voted Remain in 2016 would vote to rejoin now, and equally, most people who voted Leave in 2016 would vote to stay out, although they're a little bit less loyal to their side of the argument than the Remainers are. But the crucial group are the group which perhaps we kind of ignore, which are the people who didn't vote in June 2016. Some of whom, of course, deliberately made that choice, and maybe some of them regret it. But, of course, it also contains all those younger people who've come of age since then. And younger people are much more likely to be in favour of being inside the European Union. And it is that group which are somewhere like 2.5 to 3 to 1 in favour inside the European Union. That's the group that is principally generating what is now a clear but not dramatic pro-EU majority.
Right. But you would say it's sort of moving in that direction. I mean, I've certainly talked to younger people who don't have the, I don't know, baggage, I suppose, for want of a better word, of what used to happen with our relationship with the European Union, and they simply want to be back in the EU so they can go and work there.
Yeah, sure, because age was one of the big divisions. Of course, one of the things that's true about migration is that migration is something that younger people primarily engage in. You know, often while they still don't have attachments and family and all those things that keep us rooted to one place. Whereas older people who don't move, they're the ones for whom immigration is something that happens to them. Because as we heard during the EU campaign, that people were concerned about the fact that the place that they lived in was changing as a result of immigration. Of course, one of the reasons why perhaps Brexit is not quite so popular as it was is, of course, actually in practice, immigration has been higher since we left the European Union. And indeed, it's those people who voted to leave in particular who are now inclined to the view that actually leaving the European Union has resulted in a higher level of immigration than would otherwise be the case. So that's one thing that hasn't worked out. But in the end, the central argument, well, there are two central arguments. One is what you think the economic consequences of Brexit will be. Much debated, much disputed. But if you are somebody who voted leave in 2016 and you are now doubtful about the economic consequences, that's the group of leave voters who are most likely to change their minds. That said, the one thing that leave voters at least still value, and it's the thing that largely still keeps them loyal to the idea of being outside the European Union, is the feeling that as a result, Britain has more control over its own affairs. And that feeling is still widespread. But it's the issue. It's really now just the issue of sovereignty that works for the Leave side. You know, the economic arguments are debatable, and immigration is not worked out in the way that most Leave voters had hoped and anticipated.
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely right. Good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. Sir John Curtis, the polling expert and professor of politics at the University of Strathclyde. He's just on the run there, catching up with us with his story, his article that he wrote at the weekend about how more people actually would want to rejoin the European Union. Of course, you never really know until you actually have a vote, because you might remember in 2016 when the actual referendum took place, the polls all said that people would vote to stay in the EU. And then when they decided not to, it all came as a bit of a shock to everyone. Let's go to the calls, though, because we need to talk to some people. Lisa is in London. She's got something to tell us about the NHS. Lisa, very good morning to you.
Morning, Mike.
What can you tell me?
Just to say that I went to an NHS hospital yesterday with a friend of mine who's 75, who's got terminal cancer, for a scan. He was actually asked by the person who was going to conduct the examination a few questions. First one is, could you possibly be pregnant?
Dear me.
Apparently she had to ask that by law.
Yes. Isn't that ludicrous? What did he say?
He was shocked. I mean, he's a 75-year-old man. He's led quite a sheltered life, a very religious man.
Yeah.
He looked at me in total dismay. She then went on to say that if there was any chance he might become pregnant during the course of his treatment...
Oh, what? So a supplementary question?
Yeah.
Blimey.
He had to sign twice.
That's mad, isn't it?
Totally unbelievable. You know, we talk about the potential to offend people.
Yeah.
What about my friend of 75 being offended? If you can't respect the gender, respect the age.
Exactly. Respect the age. You're absolutely right. That is absolutely incredible. Lisa, thank you for letting us know. And we've heard that from James Whale, actually. James Whale, who's in and out of hospital, as you know, because he's suffering from cancer as well. And he's always very full of praise for the nurses, and he loves the people that treat him, and he says they do a great job. But he says they've now got to the point where they're kind of embarrassed, and they laugh, and they go, you know we're going to ask you the question. And he goes, oh, for God's sake. And they have to do it. It's ridiculous. And so James Well gets asked every single time he goes for some treatment for chemotherapy or whatever it is in a London hospital, are you pregnant? Could you become pregnant? Ridiculous. Matt in Cornwall says this, regarding the NHS, my 95-year-old neighbour had a nasty fall last night, hurting her back and her head badly. We're in Cornwall, which isn't the busiest place at the moment, but upon calling for an ambulance, I was told none were available. Full stop, no help was offered at all. It was left to 3 neighbours and 2 family members to deal with things. An absolute disgrace. So they didn't even bother to send you an ambulance, didn't even bother to say there might be one in 5 hours or 6 hours or 10 hours or 24 hours. Let's talk to Adam, who's in Nottingham. Adam, very good morning to you.
Good morning, yes. Hi.
What can I do for you?
I know there's no easy solution. There never is or anything like that, and I'm certainly not the person to be in charge or anything. But I've got more of a question, and I would love it answered, which is all this thing about immigration. And it's all up in the air. It's all chaos at the minute. Why can we not just stop it for 5 years, both legal and illegal immigration? Sort out what we've got in this country first. Sort out those, and then deport the ones that are illegal and not a benefit to themselves or this country. You know, and then we can sort all that out. And then slowly, in 5 years, let those who are qualified and want to, want a new life and want to conform to a new culture and a new way of living, and let them in.
Yeah, it's a very sensible point. They do it in Poland. They're doing it now in Germany. They're doing it in Austria. Many European countries are now picking up on it and just saying, look, we don't want any more immigrants. We can't take any more immigrants. We're going to seal the borders. And if you want to come here from another country, just don't.
We're an island. It's crazy.
Yeah, I know.
And we're not. America's got loads of room. Australia's got loads of room, and you know, and like you said, they've got loads of room. They're closing the borders. We're an island. We're not closing our borders. There is no future here. Not just for the immigrant or the immigrant children, but for our own children ourselves. There's no future unless we act.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. Adam, thank you very much indeed for your call. This from Rita, who says, my husband tries to get a GP appointment because of skin problems. On the phone, they told him to send photos in of his condition and then the committee would decide if he'll be forwarded to have an actual appointment. Absolutely ridiculous. I mean, who is running the NHS? What sort of maniacs are in charge? Chris says this from South Yorkshire. There are no wealth creators, no business people in the government, only spongers. They're good at getting free tickets, free clothes. You can't grow an economy with spongers. Very good point. Very good point. Loads of you want to get in touch this morning, so we will take more of your calls in the coming hour. Coming up next, though, we're going to talk to Peter Kirkham, former Detective Chief Inspector in the Metropolitan Police, because we're going to ask him about whether or not the law that was brought in, you might remember last year, to curb the violent attacks on people by horrible, ghastly XL bully dogs has actually had any effect. I suppose, you know, spoiler alert, it hasn't. This is Talk.
I mean, what we'll see is the limits of federal power here, because there is a lot of power that the federal government holds, but it doesn't hold all the power. Yeah. The main weapon that it has is funding. Under Obama and then under Biden, federal funding was reliant on you accepting identity claims about gender identity. So for things like women's shelters, for any school that received federal funding, for any university that received federal funding, you had to accept that people could identify as the opposite sex.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 8:51. I'm Mike Graham, and here, of course, is the home of common sense, and we're going to be elucidating all of that. Eric in Johannesburg, down in South Africa, says this: Starmer claims he's the new Margaret Thatcher. He's closer to Jack Lemmon. That's one for the teenagers. Jack Lemmon, very famous actor, if you remember him. I would say Starmer's closer to an awful lot of people. I'm not sure Jack Lemmon is one of them. We're going to speak to Peter Kirkham in a moment, former Detective Chief Inspector in the Metropolitan Police. But let's talk to Amanda first. She's got a voice note for us.
Hi, Mike. It's Amanda from East Yorkshire here. Just talking about the population in the UK. Why did they not carry on with the census? Weren't they supposed to do a census for 2021? And why did they stop it? If they did the census in 2021, they'd know exactly how many people were living here. Speak later, bye.
Yeah, I think they did do a census in 2021 because the figure that they used for the population of Britain most recently actually accounted for was 2022. So I imagine they made that from the census of 2021, and that was when they said they've got something approximating 67.6 or 67.7 million people living in the UK, and which I said has now equally risen probably to 68, 9 or maybe 70 million, because we've had 3 years of what you would call net migration of about 700,000. So another 2 million, definitely. So if you've got 67, add 2 million, gets you to 69, add a few bits and pieces, it gets you up to pretty much 70 million without even realising. Let's talk now, though, to Peter Kirkham, former Detective Chief Inspector in the Metropolitan Police, because the Dangerous Dogs Act, if you want, for want of a better word, was brought in last year, and basically we were told that all XL bully dogs would be banned. But it hasn't appeared to be quite as simple as that. Let's have a look at what Mark Hobrow says. He's the Dangerous Dogs lead, and he's the Chief Constable.
The change in legislation which we saw at the start of last year has been increasing the workload for police forces across the country quite considerably. I think it was impossible to anticipate the numbers of banned dogs that were out there, XL bully types, and I know it was anticipated potentially that it might be about 10,000, but by the time the registration database was closed, it was actually in excess of 55,000 dogs that were registered. What we've seen since that point is an immediate demand of 848 dogs that were surrendered by their owners who'd missed out on the exemption scheme, and policing had to deal with those dogs immediately, which were, in a disposal method of euthanasia. Since that time also, policing has seen in excess of 4,500 dogs which have been seized, which are Section 1 dogs by breed. So illegal dogs that have been reported by members of the community, of which we're very grateful, because these dogs were in the hands of individuals who weren't acting as was requested by us in relation to registering their dogs with DEFRA.
You can see from that it's a very complicated issue, this. I mean, apparently police forces are now spending something like £25 million a year to pay for the kennelling and the veterinary bills of these XL bullies. Let's find out what Peter knows about it. Peter, very good morning to you.
Good morning.
On the face of it, it sounded like a good idea to sort of outlaw these dangerous dogs, but whenever you get involved in these kinds of policies and these kinds of, bans, it's always, wrought with problems, isn't it?
It is, and in this particular case, we knew what the problems were going to be because they arose following the original Dangerous Dogs Act in the first place.
Yeah.
So we knew exactly what was going to happen. You were going to have this backlog of animals that were having to be seized by the police. They had no alternative in various circumstances, and that were then going to have to follow due process in relation to dealing with those animals. That involves time in veterinary kennels, maybe veterinary treatment or whatever, pending a final decision being made. And anyone that's got a pet dog knows that vets are not cheap.
No.
So we knew it was going to cost a lot of money.
Right. But, I mean, I suppose the bottom line is, has it worked in the sense, have they taken more dangerous dogs off the street, so therefore are people safer in their communities, or is there still a problem of these dogs roaming around?
Well, I'm sure they've improve the situation significantly. Removing that number of dogs from the community can only be a good thing. But I don't think anyone would say that there are now 0 dogs, dangerous dogs, of the banned breeds out there. There are obviously still some around. How many, I wouldn't like to guess.
And according to a piece I've read here this morning, an awful lot of police time is being used up in the sort of the dealing with this problem. 500,000 hours of police overtime spent dealing with it. You know, and that's not even included in the £25 million figure that the police are spending. I mean, it's kind of crazy, isn't it?
You do need to look at the numbers and ask yourself whether or not this was sensible legislation in the first place.
Yeah.
Whether there were other ways of dealing with it, perhaps. But that's the same with any legislation. A lot of road traffic legislation it is the same. It costs money to do.
Yeah.
But if you don't do it, you allow the problem to grow and continue to blight communities.
Yes. So I suppose what you're saying is this is necessary administration that has to be done, but the cost has to be found from somewhere.
Indeed, and that applies to an awful lot of policing. They do a lot of things that people say, well, you know, I wouldn't spend any money on that. But when you ask yourself, well, if they don't do it, if the police don't do it, who is going to do it? And have they got the money, or where's the money going to come for them? You're not going to save very much all around. The bottom line is any sort of policing costs money.
Yeah, absolutely right. And just on one particular issue that just tickled me, when we heard from Chief Constable Mark Hobrough just there, I was rather amused to see that he's called the, and this is why I'd have a real problem with some of the language that's used now in public sector jobs. He's called the lead of this particular process, the National Police Chiefs Council lead for dangerous dogs. Do you think they can come up with a better title?
I don't know, Mike. I think you've collared them there.
Very good. I take your point. Thank you very much indeed. Well done. Peter Kirkham actually managed to make my joke even funnier. Imagine being called that. You know, the National Police Chiefs Council lead for dangerous dogs. Well, if they were on a lead, there wouldn't be a problem, would there? 0344 499 1000 is the number to look for. I've got this from Ray, who says, by the way, great programme from you. Please keep up the good work. The phrase black hole is not an accountant's phrase. It's a journalist phrase. I used to do auditing, and if Rachel Reeves used that phrase when talking to me during an audit, I would have asked her to produce documentary evidence of what she means by a black hole. Has any journalist already asked Rachel Reeves this question? And if not, could somebody please do so without delay? And it's Ray from Edgware. I think that's a very good point. The answer to that is that, you know, a lot of journalists, unfortunately, in this day and age now, do not do what it says on the tin. They don't ask the right questions. They don't actually say what it is that they want to find out. They just sit there and they take notes and they listen to what's being said. Have we got time to do... Oh, no, we haven't got time to do it, have we? I've overrun. We've got a voice note from Jonathan coming up. We'll have to wait until after the news to get that. We will be talking to Poppy Coburn from the Daily Telegraph. She's going to be giving us her view of what Rachel Reeves is likely to say when she gets up to speak, I think in Oxford, where she's like to be harangued by some farmers, we're told, who are demonstrating outside the building where she's going to give that speech. 0344 499 1000 is the number. Send us a voice note. This is Morning Glory.
I spoke with His Majesty the King to request the dissolution of Parliament, and we will have a general election on the 4th of July.
I have just returned from Buckingham Palace to form the next government of this great nation.
Take a look at what happened.
I immediately knew it was very serious, that we were under attack.
Time has come, and this surely is England's time. Williams, who scores, and Spain lead. The shot from distance is in. It is Cole Palmer. Low ball in or far ball, slides it in.
An absolute killer of a goal.
I agree with the protest.
but I don't think the violence was anywhere near necessary.
No, I mean, I don't think anyone, Nigel, would ever think that the violence was the answer at all.
אזרחי ישראל, אנחנו במלחמה.
I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me.
If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in, they're eating the cats.
Liberal left couldn't understand that this man could be anything other than the great newsreader, a man of integrity.
Is it possible in any way, shape or form that Keir Starmer didn't know about these facts about the suspect in Southport?
I find it extraordinary that he wouldn't know. It seems that the public has not been told the truth.
No, there's nothing like an American election, I have to say. North Dakota has gone red, South Dakota's red, Texas is red.
Many people have told me that God spared my life for a reason.
Bloomberg UK reporting Ukraine has made the first long-range missile strike inside of Russia.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 2 minutes past 9, the final hour of the show. We've been here since 6 a.m. If you've only just joined us, well, I'm terribly sorry. You've missed an awfully good show so far. We've been talking about a great many things, including the population explosion that we explained yesterday, because now we're being told, basically, we've got more people living in Britain than there are living in France. The Sun has revealed that to us this morning, and France is twice the size of this country. Is it any wonder when you walk around and you think, there's a lot more people here than there used to be? We've been saying this for ages, you know, more people for the NHS to deal with, more people for GPs to deal with, more people for schools to have to put into their schools, more people for hospitals to try and put into their hospitals, more people to get into cars and go on the road, more people to get onto trains, more people to get onto buses. I mean, you know, this country is basically full up, and yet we are still getting more and more and more people coming over the course of legal migration and illegal migration as well. Let's get a voice note from Jonathan.
Hi, Mike. This is Jonathan from Berlin. I was just listening to your conversation with Professor Curtis. I have absolutely no idea why some people want to rejoin the EU. I'm currently in Germany. The German economy, as most economists will tell you, is in irreversible decline because of their net zero madness. The French economy is in the toilet. The Greeks have massive debts, the Italians too, and yet some British people want to rejoin. Maybe they should come and live over here. They wouldn't want to rejoin if they have to endure what we have to endure.
Very good point, Jonathan. Thank you very much indeed, calling in from Germany there. The German economy, as he says, absolutely down the drain. The French economy the same. Macron hanging on to his job by his fingertips. You know, the Dutch basically calling for a closure of all their borders. The Germans doing the same thing. The Italians doing the same thing. And, of course, the Austrians too. Germany's a basket case. The whole of the EU is a basket case. We do not want to rejoin it. Sir John Curtis there said that he thinks a lot of people would, if they were asked now, to rejoin it now. But I'm sure I agree with that because, of course, before the referendum back in 2016, we were told that everybody wanted to stay in the European Union, and it turned out that wasn't true either. 0344 499 1000. Rachel Reeves, very much the story of the day. She's going to be speaking later on this morning in Oxford. She's going to get a lot of demonstrations outside where she's speaking from the farming community. She's basically going to be telling us all about growth and how she's going to save the economy single-handedly because she's got a plan. I don't know what the plan is, and neither does she. This is Morning Glory. Howard says this, if asked, could you be pregnant? This is what happens to people when they go to the NHS, by the way. He said, I would say, well, I haven't had a period, so you better put me down as a yes. If they roll their eyes, then I'd say, well, don't ask such a stupid question then. Personally, I would walk out. At 66, I've lived a good life, and I'll take my chances. And one from George, who says, Mike, we are told that old people are a drain on the NHS and young people cannot afford children. Immigrants generally are 20 to 30 years older than newborns and therefore will reach pensionable age and ill health sooner. Surely this is storing up even more problems for the future in this country. Well, yeah, it probably is. People have been saying the falling birth rate is a problem. It's a real nightmare for the future of Britain. I won't have to worry about it because by the time all of that kind of catches up with everything, I won't be here any longer. My kids may have to deal with it, but that's their problem, is what I think. Poppy Coburn's here, assistant comment editor at The Telegraph. Poppy, very good morning to you.
Good morning.
Two big stories, I suppose, today. Rachel Reeves is going to get up shortly and convince us all, or try to convince us all, that growth is the way forward and that she's going to create growth. But she keeps saying the words growth and economy and put them together, but she doesn't appear to know really how to make anything grow, does she?
No, it's a bit of a cargo cult, isn't it? You can't just be banging your hands on a desk saying growth, growth, growth and getting everyone in the room to chant it too.
Right.
But I think this ultimately comes down to the makeup of the cabinet, right? You know, she said she didn't like the nickname Rachel from Accounts, but there is a legitimate criticism that the vast majority of people on the Labour front bench have never worked in a real job.
Right.
They've all been lobbyists their whole lives. They've been in Westminster their whole lives. They don't know what it takes to run a business. I think that's pretty clear in this growth strategy she's putting forward. I think it's good things she's trying to build more reservoirs. We haven't built any since 1992. But ultimately, if you have Ed Miliband as one of the most senior figures in Cabinet, the only one with actual real experience in government so far, who has said he is going to block everything to fit this insane net zero agenda. He won't allow the third runway for Heathrow. He certainly won't allow us to build any more power plants to try and reach our AI strategy. You know, this is all just a bit of a waste of time.
Well, it is really, and it's sort of more and more unconvincing the longer it goes on, isn't it? Because we've had 6 months of a Labour government, maybe 7, I suppose, if you count the Christmas holidays. And what we do know now is that the economy is a lot worse off than it was in June when the Tories were running it. And I don't hold any great candle for the Tories, but under them, the economy wasn't this bad.
Yeah, I mean, the economy was doing pretty bad under the Tories, to be clear. But, you know, the Labour Party said they are going to be changing. They said they would not be like the government that came before them. How many relaunches have happened in the last couple of months? I mean, it seems like every week Keir Starmer is saying, we're resetting government, we've got a new agenda, we've got 5 bullet points for 6 areas of change. It's like, OK, you can talk all you like, but what are you actually going to do? Now, if Rachel Reeves gets up there today and actually gives us some real action plans that are going to happen in the next 5 years, great. But I just don't believe that's going to happen. This has happened too many times before. It's all words, it's no action.
Yeah, it's all pie in the skies. It's all what we're going to do and what is coming in the future. What we do know is an awful lot of small businesses have certainly said to me that come April, they're going to be in a really bad place because they're suddenly going to have to pay more money to the people that work for them because the minimum wage has gone up. They're going to have to pay more national insurance for all the people that work for them. And many people have said to me, particularly in hospitality, it's going to wipe out all of our profits.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this again comes down to this public sector mindset that Labour have. I mean, that is their core group of voters. They know how to raise wages for people who are working in the public sector. But when it comes to the private sector, they haven't got a clue. They don't understand what it takes to build a business. So they think they can keep taxing. And it's somehow going to come out of the pockets of these supposed fat cats. But no, it's going to hurt the bottom line of the people who are actually working. And until she understands that, the economy will not get better.
Yeah. Do you suspect, as I do, that there's a sort of ideology that's planning or that sort of lies behind all the policies that the Treasury is trying to put out through Rachel Reeves, that, you know, they don't really like entrepreneurs, they don't really like business people, they keep making a lot of noise about, you know, let's bring in, you know, a sort of, you know, government of all the talents and all that, and let's involve investment in the country, let's try and bring everybody in. But it's all about public sector investment, it seems to me. They don't really understand private individual enterprise, do they?
No, they don't. And again, this is naked self-interest. You know, they've got to butter the bread of the people that actually vote for them. I don't even think it's just contempt. I think they genuinely don't understand how this stuff even works. I really do think a lot of people who are working in the Treasury today think, well, they've never heard of the Laffer curve, to put it for one. You know, they think you keep taxing people and it will mean the government will raise more money. They don't understand if you take away the incentive to go to work, guess what? People aren't going to go to work. Take overtime.
Yeah, exactly. And also, if you tax the wealthy who can easily choose to go and live elsewhere, they'll go and choose to live elsewhere, which is exactly what they're doing.
Yeah, exactly. It's too late to now turn around and say, oh, actually, we're not so mean on Mondoms, and actually maybe we do want a bit of business investment here, and all those millionaires that are going elsewhere, we might need their tax revenue.
Yeah.
You know, too late. You've made it pretty clear that you don't care about these people and you want to create a hostile environment for them.
Yeah, and I think that is becoming more and more likely to be a problem for them. And we're told this morning that she's going to be speaking up in Oxford, apparently, and there's going to be a kind of demonstration, quite a loud demonstration, I think a last-minute one that's been organised by the farming community, because, you know, only one of the groups that's against what she's doing, but a very vocal one and a very powerful one.
Yeah, and I'm really glad that you mentioned what's happening with the farmers. I mean, I think this was one of the most extraordinary betrayals early on in this Labour government to raise such a tiny, piddly amount of revenue. I mean, let's not forget we do spend about £5 billion every year just on asylum hotels. Yeah. You know, if the government wants to make cuts to balance the books, there are areas that they can start attacking on, but for ideological reasons they won't. And it's so distressing to see small family farmers, you know, be the first people essentially in the chopping block and almost be ignored by the Labour government. I hope they keep making noise. I hope they keep standing up for the right to continue running their farms.
Yeah. But, I mean, this is the thing. I mean, so much pressure is sort of building on Rachel Reeves. I mean, I would say perhaps 2 weeks ago, I thought she was in slightly more danger of losing her job than I do now, because there is this kind of relentlessness about politicians these days. If you just hang in there for long enough, you kind of get to stay on. But, I mean, she's going to have to make some kind of budget statement by the looks of it in March. And, I mean, I don't think anyone with any brains whatsoever would judge her so far as Chancellor of the Exchequer to be anything other than a complete and utter disaster.
Well, it's also, you know, I was in America recently. You talk to people, you walk around, they're all pretty optimistic about the direction their country's going in. You know, anyone in the UK today who actually think the economy is moving in a good direction, that this Labour government actually knows where they're going, actually has a plan for change and reform. I don't. I haven't met anyone who thinks that anymore. And that is a really, really depressing thought for the future.
Yeah, absolutely right. And people are taking their money out of the country, people are moving their pensions around, people are genuinely sort of reacting to what it was that she put in that budget. And much of what she was hoping to raise, I think it's fair to say, is probably not going to come to the Treasury at all.
No, of course not. But, you know, I think Rachel Reeves is pretty lucky by virtue of the fact that there's no one really to replace her in the Labour Party. You know, I don't think there is an immediately obvious successor to her who would actually have any different ideas from her. And so, you know, Keir's kind of stuck with this increasingly hapless and unpopular Chancellor purely by virtue of the fact, who else? Who else wants to do that job? Yeah. You know, who else wants to be the person to be raising taxes on everyone all the time? Because they're not willing to make the really radical action this country needs, a bit of shock therapy, to actually get the country working again.
Exactly. And the other big story I just wanted to mention is the population figures that came out actually yesterday, around about this time, where we've learned that, you know, the projection for the next few years is that we're going to have 72.5 million people. I think we've probably already reached 70 million, even without adding up all of the people that we don't know are here, if you like. And that's going to be a massive issue, isn't it, as we go forward, and as, you know, the government tries to stop the boats or tries to come up with some kind of plan, particularly as they watch what Donald Trump's doing in America.
Yeah, I know I've just been doomy and gloomy about the economy, but I really believe this is probably the most important political issue of our times.
Yeah.
That population increase is the size of 9 Manchesters in 5 years. Population size of 9 cities the size of Manchester coming into the UK in 5 years. Now, we know this because the ONS has changed the way that they are measuring people coming in, and the OBR has changed their projections, that many of those people will be a net deficit their entire lives. Yeah. So not only are we telling young people, you've got to fit the tax burden for an ageing population, you've got to prop up the NHS, which is not fit for service, and you've somehow got to find productivity gains. You're also going to have to find money to support this new population, which are not coming in as part of an economic strategy, but because the government have basically forgotten how to close the border. Right. They think it's the answer to everything. You know, oh, too high inflation, right, let's open up another visa route. You know, social care needs to be reformed. Oh, we won't do that. We'll just bring people in and undercut wages. You know, it is the answer to every politician now is more immigration, but we will all be suffering the costs of this in the years to come.
Yeah. Absolutely right. Good to talk to you, Poppy. Thanks very much indeed. Poppy Coburn, assistant commentator at The Telegraph, with some very wise words there about the economy, not just because of the fact that Rachel Reeves is stewarding it into the sea, but also because it's going to be really, really difficult to actually make ends meet, given all of the people who are coming into this country and how the population is going to be expanding, not because the birth rate's going up, quite the reverse, because migration is going up to the tune, and the estimates are only 300,000 a year. It's going to be a lot more than that. Coming up, we're going to speak to Liam Halligan, Telegraph columnist, of course, a man that knows a thing or two about the economy. Before we do that, shall we have a look at what Keir Starmer says about growth? Because he's obsessed with it.
We're setting out for growth, which is the number one priority of this government, growing our economy, wealth creation. We turn the economy around, get the growth that we need, which I'm absolutely certain we can get. What I will say is that growth is the number one priority of this government. Economic growth, wealth creation, making sure that people are better off. Growth, 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 growth.
Making sure the people are better off. The people are not better off, Sir Keith. They're actually worse off. Do you not realise that? This from Howard, who says, Mike, good morning. Was HS2 supposed to stimulate growth? Initiated by Labour and basically now binned. A new runway project in the UK. The UK cannot anymore deliver major projects. Victorian railway builders, Brunel and Wren, etc., will all be turning in their graves. Mike, don't you think the UK will turn around for the better? I don't. It's finished. Nobody does anything to stop the previous Labour government, and the Tories slowly destroying it. You often say what you said back whenever what will happen. Well, I saw it years ago and I left. Howard, I presume you're living somewhere abroad in some foreign idyll. Do tell us where you are, and maybe better than it is here. I mean, I've got great faith in the British people, right? I've got great faith in the British spirits. I've got great faith in the country itself. But what I don't have any faith in is successive useless governments who have completely run this country into the ground. It's only because of our resilience that we're actually still here and we haven't allowed them to completely wreck everything. Isn't that right? 0344 499 1000. 17 minutes past 9. This is Talk.
I watched that and it made me think, why are they making the celebrities cry? No. I can do another take. I don't think I really got that one. Can we do take first position?
Yeah.
You're right. I mean, it's not just it's performative. Of course, it's performative because it's being filmed. And even if accidentally you were thinking, do you know what? I'm just going to do a TikTok. And no, wait a minute, I'm crying. It was sent. It's not like it's automatically uploaded. So many decisions go along that pathway to be like, I want to say something about this, but I'll do it through the medium of tears and that noise that people make when they're crying.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 20 minutes past 9, and we are only moments away, maybe a couple of hours away or less, from Rachel Reeves standing up in Oxford, I think it is, to tell us exactly how she plans to get growth going into the UK economy. She keeps talking about it, she keeps mentioning the word, she keeps saying it, she keeps alluding to it, but does she really know actually how to do it? Let's talk to Liam Halligan, a man who knows a thing or two about the economy, Telegraph columnist, of course, podcaster, very, very, I would say, serious economist, unlike Rachel Reeves, who continually says that she's an economist, but nobody's quite sure. Liam, good to see you. Thank you. Welcome to the show. She talks a good game, Rachel Reeves, but I mean, most of what she says doesn't appear to have any really substance to it or resonance, does it?
Well, the thing is, Mike, Labour came into office in July. They spent a lot of time talking down the UK economy, talking about a black hole that they were supposed to have not seen in opposition, even though everyone else knew that the state of the public finances. You didn't have to be the Institute for Fiscal Studies to know the state of the public finances. Labour did that because they wanted to justify tax rises that they didn't talk about in their manifesto, because they knew people would have voted against them. That had a really serious impact on business and consumer sentiment. It's all very well slagging off the UK economy when you're in opposition, but when you're in government, it really matters. And then on top of that, Labour said they wanted to fix the public finances in that Halloween, October the 31st budget. They created the public finances because they killed growth stone dead. Last 3 months that we got figures for, here are the growth numbers for the UK: minus 0.1, minus 0.1, plus 0.1 under Labour. When you have growth figures like that, you're not fixing the public finances, you're destroying the public finances, because the markets can see the economy is not going to grow. Your budget measures are going to hinder growth because you're whacking 40 billion quid of extra taxation on the economy as a whole. That's the equivalent, Mike, of more than 5p on the basic rate of income tax. Massive. And when you're not growing, that means you get less tax revenue. That means you need more support for the economy. There's more unemployment. It tears the public finances apart. And that's why nerds like me keep going on about these gilt yields. What's a gilt yield? A gilt yield is the cost to the government of borrowing. And the cost to the government of borrowing now is way higher than it was at the peak of the so-called panic over Liz Truss's mini budget. We're now spending more, Mike, on debt interest a year than we spend on education. Think of the morality of that. That's less money for public services because the government's spending upward of 100 billion quid a year now on debt interest. It's not paying back the debt, it's just servicing the debt, paying the interest on the debt, often to creditors, investors overseas. This is a mad way to run the economy. If you want to get growth going, you need to lower the tax burden, you need to strip away more onerous regulation. You've got to let the British economy fly. And there's no one at the top of the Labour Party who's got the courage or the ideological nous to let that happen, however many times they say the word growth in interviews.
Yes, because it seems to me that they believe that growth comes only from one place, and that is from central government, that only they can kind of create businesses, that only they can create jobs. Clearly incorrect on all counts, really. But the thing that I don't understand, and maybe you can explain it to me, because I'm you know, like most people, relatively, you know, inexperienced about economics, right? Even though I did a degree in it, I still can't work it out. At the end of the day, they borrowed 17.8 billion pounds in December alone, right? Now, if they've got a £22 billion black hole, they've practically doubled it. What are they doing with the money?
Exactly. They're borrowing huge amounts each month. About 5 or 6 billion of that 17 billion they borrowed in December alone, Mike, wait for it, they're spending on debt interest payments. So they're borrowing money to spend on servicing existing debt. This is turning into a Ponzi scheme. On top of that, the markets can see, traders can see that when you give the train drivers a 15% pay rise, right, which they did on coming into office, and then the train drivers say thank you very much and then come back for even more, which they now are. Right. They can see the trade unions have got Labour on the run. They can see that Labour haven't got anyone at the top of government with the kind of heft to tell the unions to back off. Right. They can see that these are commitments the government is making, financial commitments, that they're not going to be able to get out of. And that's why markets are concerned. Now, the way to fix this problem isn't necessarily to absolutely strip back government spending, have a kind of scorched earth policy, because in a democracy, you can't do that. The way to get out of this problem is to grow, make the economy bigger, so the economy can stand and raise taxes and pay debt service payments on that much, much bigger stock of debt that we're now trying to deal with. But when you're raising taxes at the same time and then doing really stupid things in your employment bill to make it more expensive for employers who are trying to recover post-COVID, who you're whacking employer national insurance increases on, you then make it even more difficult for them to take people on, even more expensive with all these extra conditions and, you know, sick leave and maternity benefit from day one and all the rest of it. All very nice if you're at a dinner party in North London, but it doesn't work if you're trying to run a small business in the Midlands or the Northwest of England. And I'm afraid it's those small and medium-sized enterprises which Labour don't understand. There's no one at the top of government who's been anywhere near creating a small and medium-sized enterprise, Mike. These are the people who get up every morning and make the economy work. These SMEs, many of them will be listening to talk radio. Many people will be nodding from the waist listening to what I'm saying here. These SMEs, they employ 2/3 of people. They create 50% of growth in this country. They are being mullered at the moment. Business rates are going up, national insurance contributions are going up, the minimum wage is going up by 7%, by 16% if you're trying to employ young people, many of whom desperately need a start. You know, the difference between Keir Starmer, Mike, we're old enough to remember New Labour, right? When Tony Blair came in, I was a political correspondent at the FT. My job was to really get to know the front bench of the Labour Party in both opposition and then in government. Yes, they had Gordon Brown, who was very statist in his ideology. He is Rachel Reeves' political hero. You know, she literally had a poster of him up on the wall in her room at university. But they also had Tony Blair, who does get economics instinctively, and Blair was powerful enough that in the room, when big decisions were made by New Labour, by Blair's government, who came in, by the way, with national debt at 35% of GDP rather than 100% of GDP. They had a much, much better economic inheritance. But there were people in the room when New Labour made those decisions who really understood financial markets. People who are still knocking around, like Gavin Davis, who's partner of Goldman Sachs at the time. People who are now past, like Derek Scott, who was a big city economist too. They were allowed in the room and they were grown-ups and they would say, you couldn't do that, but the markets will tank if you do that. There's no one in the room at the top of New Labour who really understands financial markets. And guess what? Financial markets know that. They know that. And that's why they're worried.
And so do you think that then the word of recession, which is looming larger and larger with every day that passes, is actually coming then? Will we be, do you think, in a recession soon?
So a recession is when you get 2 consecutive quarters, that's 2 consecutive 3-month periods of negative economic growth, so the economy contracting. I just gave you the numbers for the last 3 months, that's September, October and November, Mike. Minus 0.1, minus 0.1, plus 0.1. So the economy is basically flatlining. I don't, you know, I got to be responsible about this. I'm an economic commentator. I don't want to be seen to be talking down the UK economy. And like you, maybe because we're from similar backgrounds, I have enormous respect and faith in British entrepreneurial spirit, the ability of our companies to dust themselves down, to find a way to keep themselves going, employing people and all the rest of it. So there are some good things going on in the UK economy. And some of what Labour's talking about is the right thing to be talking about, easing up planning restrictions, getting infrastructure projects going and so on. Though that takes a great deal of time. But I do worry, and more importantly, financial markets worry that growth, where's it going to come from, Mike? These tax rises I'm talking about, they haven't even come in yet. coming in April. The national insurance increase on employers is coming in April. The minimum wage rise is coming in April. And already you're seeing consumer indices of confidence, business indices of confidence at very, very low levels. So I don't want to talk the UK economy down. On the contrary, I want the government to do well. I want our country to do well. I know in my bones that when people like me talk about these highfalutin numbers, there are real people behind these reductions in growth. You know, families breaking up, dreams being crushed, people being laid off, genuine human suffering. But, Mike, I don't know where the growth is going to come from. You are increasing the burden on business to this extent because you want to give your mates in the public sector unions massive pay rises, because you want to do net zero policies that, quite frankly, are now mad. As somebody that wants to see us use less fossil fuels, the way Labour's going about it in such a doctrinaire way, following on from the Tories, by the way, much of the political class doesn't understand this stuff. I don't know where the growth is going to come from, even though I desperately want to see growth, but I do know historically when the tax burden is at a 70-year high, which is where it was at when the Tories went out of office. Yeah, thanks very much for that, lads. And then you put the tax burden up even more, that can only stymie growth.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. Great to talk to you, Liam. Thank you very much indeed. Good to see you. Liam Halligan, their Telegraph columnist. A pretty damning indictment, I would say, from him of what is going on. Rachel Reeves will speak today about how she's going to try and manage growth and how she's going to try and create growth. I don't think she's going to be able to convince you or me or anybody else, for that matter, because it certainly seems to me that this government has put more burdens on the people, more burdens on companies, more burdens coming in April on the people that keep this country going. You're looking there at the farm protest, which is going to be going on up in Oxford, where Rachel Reeves is going to be speaking. And, you know, nothing looks particularly great, does it? How about this from Ian in Newark, who says, just a point of interest, through my business I know an armed police officer who works in South Yorkshire. This is about dangerous dogs. He has personally shot 12 of these dogs, 10 of which had turned on their owners in their own home. The owners had called the police after some horrific flesh wounds. Blimey, that's a bit grisly, isn't it? Listen, here's the thing for you, just in case you didn't know what to do with some of the information that you might have received over the course of the last few weeks. If you think you've got a story that's affected you or your family, all you have to do is get in touch with us. If you think we should know about it or investigate it further, email us at tips@talktv, talk.tv, I should say. You are the eyes and ears of this country. You are the eyes and ears of our radio station, television station here. You're on Britain Streets. We want to bring you real-life issues that affect hard-working Brits every single day. Email us right here at tips@talk.tv, and we will pick up that story and we will run with it and we will investigate it for you and we will report on it so that everybody else can find out what it is that you know. It's 9:34. This is Talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 9:36. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through, of course, until 10 o'clock. Julie Hartley-Brewer will be here just before that. Very Dangerous Dogs from Neil. He says, why don't they make the owners pay the cost that the police have to pay when they confiscate the dogs? Well, again, it sounds like a good idea, but it may well be that the people who have those dogs don't really have the money. It's a bit like saying you're going to fine every yobbo who does something bad on a bus. You march him down to the cash machine and you go, oh, he hasn't got a card. Can't take any money out. What are you going to do? This from John. The EU poll is rubbish, Mike. You cannot answer this question without knowing the terms the EU would apply. Join the euro, pay more money, and fishing are just three areas. That's on the news that Sir John Curtis was suggesting to us, that if we had a rerun referendum now, loads of people would want to rejoin the European Union. I'm not so sure. Let us talk now, though, to Peter Williams, Director of the Family Education Trust, because the assisted dying bill has been back in the news this week. People have been talking about how it's going to be taken through Parliament, how soon it's going to be enacted, whether or not it's going to be difficult, whether or not it's going to be a little bit too glibly presented. Certainly there have been some criticisms of those who are advocating for it. Let's find out what Peter has to say. Peter, very good morning to you.
Thank you for having me. Good to see you.
Not at all. It's a very contentious issue, this still, isn't it? I mean, despite the fact that it seemed to pass without too much complaint and too much opposition in Parliament, the first initial reading, there's still an awful lot of argument going on sort of behind the scenes. Where are we with this exactly?
Well, I don't know. I think it went through a lot of arguments in the first stage. It only gained its passage to committee stage by about 28 votes. So I'd say that's pretty close. It wouldn't be too difficult for that to change. But in any case, it's a lot of arguments going on right now at committee stage. And some of the most disturbing stuff I think that we are hearing from day one, at the very least, was Dr. Rachel Clark, who's a palliative care consultant, and also the chief executive of the Royal College of Nursing, pointing out that a deficit in palliative care could lead people to actually opt for assisted suicide because they don't want pain any longer. Not because palliative care isn't effective, because palliative care isn't extensive enough within our system such that we can avoid people being subject to a postcode lottery. I mean, Rachel Clark particularly pointed to there being whole weekends at the hospital where she works and nights where there isn't a single palliative care specialist available to the people who are suffering. If in that context, you're not going to have people opting for assisted suicide out of a choice or autonomy. They're going to be doing it because they're in pain. That's not what we want. That's exactly the opposite of what we want. It's not a system that's going to be working for the vulnerable, for the terminally ill, for anybody else who would be affected by this. Rather, it would be something which would be forcing people into an early death, and that would be really appalling. And of course, we also heard the idea that the High Court, which is supposed to be the one governing this, well, if we're going to give it to the judges, 3/4 of them would be dealing with this non-stop all the time. So anything else that the High Court deals with would be pushed aside. So this is not a workable system, very clearly. And so I think that we are learning a lot more about just how very disturbing this proposed system.
So as the bill sort of has its passage through Parliament, then, would you expect it to be more refined as time goes on, or would you prefer it to be rejected out of hand and kind of rewritten? What's likely to happen, do you think?
Well, I'm hoping that they do obviously reject it eventually. I think it's quite a dangerous bill. But in the meantime, whether there would actually be any amendments to mollify the worst aspects of this bill isn't entirely clear. I mean, they are mulling over the idea of strengthening doctors' rights, which is a very good idea. They're mulling over whether or not to ban doctors for introducing the subject to patients, which would also be a good idea, and strengthening language on maybe psychiatric assessment, simply an assessment by two doctors just on its own. But even then, the dangers of this bill would still remain. And those are only potential amendments. They're not necessarily going to come through. I think that a lot of the people who are in favour of this bill are lionising the idea of autonomy and choice over protections for the vulnerable. And so it's going to be interesting to see where MPs finally land on this, whether they really think that is a justifiable thing to introduce to UK law and medicine as things stand, given the medical sector as it currently is and the legal sector as it currently is. And for that reason, I hope that a lot of them would say, irrespective of what you think about the rights and wrongs of assisted suicide, this is not the time to do it.
No, because funnily enough, one of the things that's been a sort of side issue to this argument is after what happened in Southport and the dreadful scenes there and the recent court case and the imprisonment of the Southport killer, people have said to me, you know, well, if we're going to have a vote on whether or not we should have assisted dying in this country, isn't it time to have a vote on whether we return to capital punishment? Because the two things perhaps go hand in hand, which is not something I suppose that anybody who was talking about assisted dying would have ever expected to be an issue.
Well, I think that's really interesting, isn't it? That the whole ethic of whether we can take human lives has come up. Now, as it happens, on a personal level, speaking entirely personally, I'm in favour of the death penalty. But that's partly because I do think that when you have something like a forensic investigation followed by a court process, there are meaningful protections in place to make sure, particularly with modern technology, that we don't have people who are innocent being found guilty. When it comes to assisted suicide, all you have at the moment is the fig leaf of a process in which you have two doctors interviewing a patient, and within this bill it would be within 21 days. How anyone could know a patient reasonably enough to know whether they're under pressure within 21 days is beyond me. But in any case, that's what's planned. And that's what would lead you to some kind of confidence this person is not under undue pressure, either by their relatives or by their doctors, maybe nurses who are trying to free up a bed, anything like that. Really, I mean, that really, if we are going to go with assisted suicide, despite the fact that that's the process involved, but not have the death penalty, when actually we would have a forensic process, that would be ridiculous. So I think it makes total sense to be in favour of the death penalty and against assisted suicide. I don't think it makes any sense to be in favour of assisted suicide, but against the death penalty.
Right. So what's the next step, if you like? What's the next stage of the bill's passage? What happens now?
Well, it's going to go through the final bits of it's committee investigation. This is not committee stage per se, this is committee investigation. And they will continue, hopefully, to talk to various different experts. There's been a lot of resistance about talking to, for example, disability rights experts and the Royal College of Psychiatrists. Now, they've U-turned on that. Why they were opposed to it in the first place is somewhat suspicious, but in any case, they've now U-turned on that. So they'll hear from those. Hopefully, there will be more points come out that will inform the committee stage debate in Parliament. So that will probably be around, I would say, April, and then report stage very shortly after and third reading. Interesting enough, it's third reading when there will be a chance for the Commons to finally say no to this. I think if it gets to the Lords, there's very little, if any, chance that will happen. But all they need really is 28 MPs to switch sides and say, actually, I supported this because I wanted to hear the debate, but I actually think this is a really bad idea. David Davis was one of those people who said he thought that they need 5 days of debate within Parliament in government time. He's definitely not going to get that, so I think I definitely should vote against it. But once you've got that, that discernment by MPs, I'm hoping that maybe some of the 40 MPs who didn't bother voting at all might come over and say, no, this really is a very, very bad idea. But that's what will happen at third reading. If it gets past third reading, it'll go to the House of Lords. There may be some amendments proposed there. But ultimately, I think once it gets to that stage, I think it's probably almost certainly going to go through.
Yeah, interesting. Well, we'll keep an eye on it. Peter, thank you very much indeed. Peter Williams there, Director of the Family Education Trust, talking about the likelihood that this bill will indeed go through. Will it remain in the form that it is? Will it change in some way, shape or form through the process? And is it the right thing to do? An awful lot of people have got very strong opinions on this. You know, I've said before, I think that, you know, the assisted dying bill is quite a difficult kind of, you know, thing to juggle when you think about whether or not you want to give people the right to be able to help their relatives or help their loved ones to actually lose their lives and kill themselves. It's a very, very difficult one to be absolutely sure about. And it's one of those things that for many people, including me, it's a bit of a quandary. You're not absolutely sure. I'm not sure whether we should make a law about it. I'm not sure it's the right thing to do. 0344 499 1000 is the number. Let's get a voice note from Sam.
Morning, Mike. Fantastic show. Do you know, every time I hear Keir Starmer, I can't get Zippy from Rainbow out of my head. You know, it's almost like, Jeffrey, how can we improve our military? And also, Jeff, how can I sort out the economy and immigration? What am I going to do about immigration, Jeffrey?
fixing the foundations, I think you'll find is the phrase you were looking for. This from Keith in Durham. We desperately need somebody like Liam Halligan running our economy. He clearly knows what he's talking about. Peter says this: it's knowledgeable people like Liam Halligan that Reeves should be listening to and taking advice from. But that would be too sensible. And finally, one from Gary, who says, morning, Mike. Liam Halligan, a real economist with common sense. We can all see it, but Rachel from Accounts and two-tier Keir do not want to see it. If ever a flip-flop was necessary, it is now on the economy. Well, I think that's right. They need to sort it out. They need to swallow their pride and go, look, we got it completely wrong. We know that we're not going to get any growth out of our policies that we put in, so now we're going to change track and we're going to do something completely different. And that is going to actually grow the economy. Really? Is it? Can you do it? Yes, we can. You know, Keir the Builder, Bob the Builder, whatever. This is Talk.
We said 2.5% by 2030, so there'd be a steady increase in the defence budget between now and then. It would, in real terms, over those years, over £20 billion extra. Labour won't put a date on it, and until they put a date on it, it's funny money. You can't actually run the defence budget, and it's worse because they're threatening to spend £9 billion on renting back the Chagos Islands and Diego Garcia.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's 10 minutes to 10. We are almost at the end of the show. The sun appears to be still shining incredibly, despite the fact that there's a bit of gloom in the economy, despite the fact that there's a lot of gloom in the Labour Party and the government at the moment as well. It's time to talk about the BBC, which might not be quite as gloomy as you might think it would be. Roger Bolton is here, former BBC presenter. Roger, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike.
I didn't know they called you a former BBC presenter, but anyway, very nice to see you.
I'm ex a lot of things. So
I know, well, aren't we all? Listen, a couple of stories for you. One in the Times today. You may still have to pay a licence fee if you only watch Netflix. This is probably not going to go down too well with those people who think that the BBC is already charging too much money for their licence fee and also not really necessarily providing the greatest service that they could.
Yeah, I don't think this is a serious proposal. I mean, what's going on at the moment is that there's a genuine review of all the possible ways of funding the BBC. And, the license, we all know what's wrong with the licence fee. It's regressive. A lot of people are increasingly not paying it.
Yeah.
The trouble is, when you look at the alternatives, a lot of them are worse. So what we see now is various ideas being floated around, and I don't think any of them at the moment are going to be government policy. But I think the discussion is the wrong way around, really. We should be saying, do we need public service media anymore?
Yeah.
Public service content. How do you deliver it? Do we need the BBC? Then how do you pay for it?
Right.
Instead of focusing only on what we're paying, why don't we focus on what we need or think we need?
Well, isn't it interesting the way that the market is sort of going? I mean, only this morning I was reading a piece about Sky News, which may now be going away from what they call linear television and moving just purely onto an online platform, which an awful lot of media organisations, including ours, have done, because the linear platform is in decline, I suppose you might say. I mean, obviously there's still millions of people that watch it, but they're not in as many millions as they used to be.
I think that's true, and I think the business models don't work on the whole, and that organisations like your own and Sky have no option but actually to go the way of the game to try and raise income. But that's when you say, is there such a thing as market failure? Are there things that the market can't do? And that's when you get into public service. Now, I would say, because I support it, universality is important. We've got to have places where we come together on major occasions, be it the death of kings or queens or whatever, or national occasions. We do want a news service which is committed, and we try and hold it to that, to be as objective as possible. We do have to be concerned about education programs for our children. You see, the problem we're in such a distorted world where the United States is so powerful that it's extremely difficult to compete with it on its own terms. So we get a flood of relatively cheap programming from the States. Some is brilliant, some is some is awful. But there are areas like children's programs, I would say science, I would say religion, I would say about regional programs, where we have to say, hold on, we're happy if people don't have access to that. And also, do we want somewhere where people can come together? See, one of the things that your network and so on talks about is the danger of people in London and elsewhere losing touch with the rest of the country. And that's true. But when you look at international content from America, that makes it even more difficult.
But doesn't that mean? But isn't that also an argument for not broadcasting that on a sort of what you might call a linear platform? You know, Channel 4, for example, which prides itself on being, an independent, left-leaning organisation, which provides, some of its own programming, but an awful lot of its own programming, if you look at it, is actually brought in imports from the US. And once you get past the news and the documentaries after about 9 o'clock at night, it's all old episodes of Friends and old episodes of American sitcoms. It's kind of, what's the point of that?
Yeah, well, I know, but that's not an accident. There's a real problem in terms of the advertising market in this country, which Channel 4 depends upon. That's going down. When you look at the BBC and the licence fee, through a deliberate act of government, right or wrong, BBC licence fee is now worth, in real terms, 38% less than it was 2010. So as you had a situation where the Netflix giants get loads and more money, you got the domestic people having less money. And the other thing, what we have to decide as society, do we want to intervene or not? Do we want to say we want local news? We want children's programs. We want drama made about the north of England. Netflix does brilliant stuff, but it has to sell it around the world. When ITV did, for example, Mr. Bates versus the Post Office, they didn't get the money back. They couldn't sell it abroad. I was talking to Peter Kosminski, who directed for the BBC, the Wolf Hall. And they had to take a cut in salary himself because no Netflix, no streamer would pay for Wolf Hall. So what we need to do is decide do we want this sort of programming? If we do, we'll have to pay for it in some way. The trouble is, which way, and that gets very difficult.
Right. And I think maybe there is a commercial imperative as well, though, because if it's not going to be paid for and people don't want to produce it or deliver it to a particular audience, it might well be lovely that, there are talented and creative people who want to make it, But, you know, unfortunately, you know, it's like me. I mean, I could go to HarperCollins upstairs, or actually downstairs, and go, you mind if I write you a book about, you know, somebody climbing a mountain? And they might say, no, thanks very much, you know, get lost. And that's just the way of the world, isn't it? You know, I don't need to write that book. It doesn't have to be written. We don't have to cover, you know, the post office story. It's not necessarily going to, you know, improve the lot of anybody in this country. It's a nice thing to do, but if it doesn't make money, then don't do it.
I agree, and there's a lot of people like me in the creative business, they're pretty precious about this and think you have a right to be heard and whatever. No, let's put all that aside and say the market will deliver lots. But are there things that we care about?
I think news. I think the BBC should do news. I think they should do news properly.
News, education, religion, history. You know, if you're not careful, the only history our kids will ever hear about are the Nazis and the Tudors. Do we think there's more to British history than that?
Well, and I mean, to be fair, the way the BBC judges things these days, you don't know what the sort of history that they're going to report on is going to be like, you know.
Well, I know you say that, Mike, but what I'm saying, the general point is, if we think there's a role for informing the public properly about a range of things, then you have to consider where the market succeeds, where it fails. And if you think it fails, and I think it does regionally and locally and nationally in some ways, you've got to intervene. Now,
well, the other argument, of course, sorry to interrupt you, is that, you know, if, for example, you know, the big operators like the BBC do not sort of suck up all of the creative arts in this country, you might actually create different outlets for people who might be able to go to an independent production company who might be able to produce something actually for a lot less money. And then they wouldn't be kind of, you know, forced out of the market by the all-encompassing BBC.
Yeah, the problem with independent production, because the independents, of course, can make programs for the BBC as well as Channel 4 and 8, is that because the money going into independent production has been reduced, the revenue available to the BBC and elsewhere is down. What they're trying to go is big hits and cheap programming. And what's missing in the middle, in my view, is a range of good documentary programs and other things and plays that we'd like to see. But that's a function of an economic model that doesn't work. So what we have to decide is, do we want to intervene to try and ensure that first-time writers from the north of England or from Wales or whatever have a chance of going on air? Do you want local journalism to report on local planning decisions or not? If we want these things and we want programs for children, we have to intervene in some way. Now,
yeah, maybe. But, I mean, we also have to make sure that those programmes are not completely and utterly biased in one direction or another. But listen, Roger, good to talk to you. Thank you very much. We've got to run, because Julie Hartley-Brewer's here. She's very important. And I can't have her waiting any longer. My fauvorite line, right, in this story about the BBC, apparently, you know this ridiculous Home Office review thing? They say that books listed by authors such as Shakespeare, Chaucer and Milton are among the key texts of interest to white nationalists and
clear
supremacists.
Giveaway. We're all far right now.
What?
I love the thick of it. Love a bit of Shakespeare. Definitely far right.
I was in a restaurant yesterday that you'll know.
I mean,
well.
how unusual.
I'll tell you about it later.
I saw some of the photos,
yes,
young man.
Yeah, I mean, for some reason I start smoking cigars. I don't know why. Anyway,
by the way, can I point out this meal started off as lunch, didn't it?
It did start off as lunch.
I saw a photo taken around 9 p.m.
Yes,
just
I
saying.
know. It was quite,
Just saying.
It wasn't as long a lunch as the one you had there. But the thing is, it's absolutely and utterly mad, isn't it? That you kind of go, what is going on? Why are we? I came up with this idea yesterday.
Paid for
I'm
by
thinking
us.
of a TV